of equity strategists and portfolio managers, 44% say it will be below 30,000 and just about flat for the year. Others are more optimistic, 25% seeing it nearly $40,000, and an equal amount predicting $50,000. Now, Bitcoin reached a high of nearly $65,000 back in April, and right now you can take a look at Bitcoin. It's trading under $33,000 at about $32,981. What do you think, Beck? If you were part of that survey, what would you predict?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, it's pretty volatile. Could go any direction. And 30,000? I don't know. I wouldn't bet on this. How about you?
I will take, by the end of the year, I will, and maybe I'll be a cynic here, I will take the under, but if you said 10 years from now, I would take the over.
Okay, then I'll take the over just to play the other side.
What's Joe say?
Happy Bitcoin Tuesday, freaks. It's your boy, Matt Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch. This is episode 29. Special shout out to our ride or die freaks joining us in the live chat, considering Euro 2020 is going on right now, Spain versus Italy. So I appreciate you guys choosing us over that match. If you feel the need to go watch that, you can always watch our archives after the fact at citadeldispatch.com. They're hosted on bitcointv.com. Full downloads, no ads. You can even torrent if you want via bitcointv.com, which is pretty fucking cool. If you're joining us on the audio feed, that was CNBC speculating on price because they have a survey of I guess a bunch of rich people who think Bitcoin's going to be under 30K at the end of the year. That formally marks bear hunting season for us. It's just pretty interesting watching how quick people switch from bullish to bearish in these cycles. It doesn't matter how many times you've been in the space, how long you've been in the space. It catches you off guard every single time. So it will be cool to watch them get caught with their pants down. What else do I have for us? Today, we will be focusing on privacy and security best practices. I have two return guests here. I have Keto Miner of Nodl and Craig Raw of Sparrow Wallet. I think together, the three of us should have a very insightful conversation here about, probably the most important thing for Bitcoiners today, which is getting your privacy and security in order before the price goes up and you end up securing a lot more money than you are currently holding. This is Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show about Bitcoin, distributed systems, privacy, and open source software. As I said earlier, this is dispatch number 29. We've been coming to you live for over 6 months now. And as I said earlier, all of those archives are available at citadeldispatch.com. I want to thank all the freaks who continue to support the show and help keep it ad-free, commercial-free with no sponsors. That is how I want to continue. I am here with you guys, ride or die. Let's fucking make it happen. So I do appreciate all the freaks supporting the show. You can do that through citadeldispatch.com. You can also do that through our LN URL link on the QR code on the bottom left if you're watching the video stream. And my favorite way of having you guys support the show is through Podcasting 2.0 apps, which you can look up on newpodcastapps.com, which allows you to stream sats directly to Dispatch. Every day after we record live and I post it up to our RSS feed, I watch the sats stream in from listeners around the world who are using the Podcasting 2.0 apps. My favorite one being Breeze, We also have a Sphinx tribe, which allows you to not only stream sats, but also it's a private chat that runs through the Lightning Network, and you can donate in that tribe as well. So all links for that is also at citadeldispatch.com. Once again, thank you guys for supporting the show. You are what makes Dispatch unique and special. So with all that said, I want to welcome Keto Miner onto the show again. Keto, what's up? How's it going?
What's up, freaks?
Fuck yes. And Craig Raw, how's it going, Craig?
Yeah, good, man. Thanks for having me back, Matt.
Yeah, so I mean, I love all of our conversations, and I'm excited to have you guys both as return guests. I think the more your presence is on Dispatch, the better for the whole audience and all of us including myself. I think this discussion will be kind of wide ranging. We do have a decent amount of freaks joining us live here with the live chat, so I expect them to be throwing questions as we continue this conversation. I don't know really where we should start at first. I think maybe let's just start with a little check-in with Sparrow, Craig, because I feel like when you first came on Dispatch, I don't even know what episode that was. I guess I should have looked that up ahead of time. But I feel like Sparrow has come a long way since then.
Yeah, it's just been building away. I don't know, Matt. For me, it's I don't really think too much about how much it's growing. It's not like there's an incentive model there where I get paid more the more people that you sort of use it, really. So for me, it's just a case of trying to add the features that make sense and squash any bugs that might come as fast as I can. But I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's starting to become seen as a decent option, I hope. So yeah, I kind of just like the fact that the vision that I had is now kind of a real thing in the world. And yeah, it's certainly gets me up every day, and I'm proud to be part of the whole sort of Bitcoin ethos that we're in.
Awesome. I mean, off the top of my head, I guess this is, you said you don't really get paid the more users that are using Sparrow, which is true. But one thing I did think of while you were just speaking there is you did add a donation page, I believe, since last time you were on Dispatch.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you can go to sparrowwallet.com/donate. And I'm very grateful for sure of any, donations that I get. But it's not about that for me. I didn't begin this whole thing looking for that. For me, it's really just about trying to provide a decent option, mainly for people to realize the store of value that Bitcoin holds, right? That's the number one use case. It's kind of like the sort of email use case that the internet had in the sort of early days that really brought it to the fore, and that's the number one use case. I just kind of wanted to nail that and do it in a way that I thought was best. So that's kind of what drives me. Yeah.
And then I guess the other big addition that I saw, we could talk about the trade-offs here a little bit. You almost kind of, I felt like you added it begrudgingly, was that you added integrated Bitcoin wallet tracker so that you can just run Bitcoin Core on the same machine as Sparrow for easier setup without an Electrum personal server, right?
Yeah, I've obviously got my my sort of drawbacks to doing it that way, but I think it's a valid approach. And as I think I have like a pinned sort of tweet which says, the ideas that I had at the start are not the ideas that I have now. I kind of had this idea that it has to be the best way, or don't even do it. And what I've realized is that you actually need to kind of take people on this journey where many people, in fact, most people are not going to start off with their own node and running servers behind the node, and it's just way too much. But, job number one is to get people to get their coins off an exchange. So, if you can just get people to download a non-custodial wallet, and even if they're using a public server, you've done like 70-80% of the job. For me, that's critical. And then moving to a Bitcoin Core wallet, yeah, sure. Bitcoin Core, the wallet does store all of the addresses in plain text. Not ideal for cold storage, but again, now you're at least private. And then moving to the Electrum server, that's just really getting to the stage where even if your server gets taken out of your hands or hacked or whatever, no one can tell what's going on. So long as your wallet is encrypted, you're good. So yeah, I mean, I did add that, and I sort of now see it as part of the journey. So that's kind of that kind of happened in retrospect, but I think it's good it's there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that a lot of us that are obsessed with Bitcoin, we tend to get into the weeds, especially on Bitcoin Twitter and on this show. I mean, this show is a more technical focused show for more dedicated Bitcoiners, and maybe them helping their friends and family is kind of like the target market that I've looked at for the freaks in the audience here. And I feel like, sometimes I'm sitting there like having a beer and I'm just like, we get so far into the weeds and 95% of people are just buying Bitcoin on Robinhood and they can't even withdraw it if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, and that's my big sort of worry, right? Is that if we don't get enough people to custody their own Bitcoin, we're going to get rehypothecated Bitcoin, right? That's going to happen. I mean, if the risk is minimal, there'll always be some risk, but if the risk is minimal, then people are going to do it, and they might get away with it, and that's the big worry to me, right? That's what we have to avoid. So, making wallets that are easy to use, that's kind of that's the sort of ethos here, right? That's what I'm trying to do anyway.
Yeah, and kind of trying to get users to slowly improve themselves rather than expecting the world for them instantly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think I was listening to Rabbit Hole recap, and Marty made the point, like, just make a small improvement every day, and I think that makes a huge amount of sense, right? So just getting people to download a wallet, get their coins off the exchange, great idea. That's what I just try and do. And if they're using a server which reveals their XPub, I don't worry too much about that, because I know that further down the line, once they're more, familiar with what's going on, hopefully the software has taken them on a journey to kind of get to the point where they're thinking, oh, maybe I should go off and buy myself a nodl. That's kind of what I think we need to do. It can't just be landed on them on day one.
Right. And I mean, this is something, Keto Miner, that you've been I guess, battling your own demons with over at Nodl. I mean, Nodl was originally, I guess when Nodl hit the market, there really wasn't many of these dedicated node projects. And I feel like Nodl kind of aimed to be a more user-friendly option, a plug and play. You just buy this device and it just works.
I guess at the time we launched, Casa just launched, and the only other on the market was I'm not sure I recall the name correctly, Seedbox or something. The one which was like an Intel NUC with just Bitcoin Core pre-installed on it, basically, and the company who was supposed initially to make the Samurai partnership, but they closed shop just before they did. And when I first started doing a full node, it was basically just to run Bitcoin Core and go through Andreas' book and all the comments, because I didn't want to do it on my own computer. Back then the blockchain was probably 60 or 70 gigs, and you could run that on a Raspberry 0.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like as a Nodl user, I had one of the original Nodls. Did you you never really decided to go full grandma mode. Do you want to like talk about why that decision was, or like how you've had to deal with support requests and the different levels of tech levels of your users? I mean, I think, um, if most of our audience here listens to pretty much every dispatch, I assume, at least that's what the download listen numbers look like. And we recently had this node roundtable with the overwhelming majority of dedicated node projects on for that show. And one thing that becomes very clear if you start looking at those different projects is they all kind of try and target different demographics. And on one side, you have like the Ronin Dojos and the Raspberry Blitz. That's definitely a more advanced user set. Raspberry Blitz still doesn't have a GUI. They have like a command line style GUI. Ronin Dojo just recently added, a more sexy GUI, but it's definitely a more advanced user product. And then you have like the My Nodes and the Umbrals and the Start Nines that are trying to hold your hand as much as possible and be pretty and as user friendly as possible. And I feel like Noddle kind of sits in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, totally. We definitely sit in the middle. We are trying to be more on the user friendly side, and at the same time, we are working on an advanced user mode in which you can just use the UI to edit the configuration files and do whatever you want in them. But yeah, we just recently started working with a UX person to work on the onboarding process and have something much more user friendly, like for the first contact. And during this setup process, you will be able like to choose if you want to run in the user friendly mode or in the advanced mode. Yeah, but yeah, today we are definitely like really in the middle, and my goal was not necessarily to be like very user friendly, but to follow some best practices. Like probably the first lines of code I wrote was the installation script for Bitcoin Core, which verifies the signatures and gives you a precise error, like I failed to download, failed to verify signatures, something weird with PGP happened, and so on. So that was like the first bricks, and yeah, and we are trying to do that as much as possible for everything.
Because I feel like there's I'm trying to put a connection here between what you guys have been doing at Noddle and what Craig has been working on with Sparrow. I feel like you guys both are kind of hitting that balance in the middle between trying to be user friendly and pretty, while also not trying to sugarcoat the important stuff, which I feel like is not a typical. It's not a typical result of what you would see in closed source, Silicon Valley software, which is just constantly trying to be like this super polished UX and just hide everything from the user and hide all the trade-offs from the user. So a lot of experienced dev teams, I feel like, try and go that Silicon Valley approach, but maybe what we really want to see in Bitcoin land in terms of increasing that sovereign Bitcoiner base that uses their own node, makes every spend a coin join, avoids KYC, helps their friends and family, tries to broaden the circular economy. Trying to increase that base is not an easy process. It takes a lot of education, which is what I've been focused on, is on the education side. But I feel like tools like both of yours, where it kind of bridges the gap, where it allows, it doesn't sugarcoat shit, but it's still very clean software. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like was this an active goal by you guys, or did you just stumble into that result? Because that's what I'm witnessing.
Happy to have a go at that. Yeah, Matt, I very much agree. If you look at what the kind of Silicon Valley VC world is trying to do, they're trying to take responsibility away from the user, make them into consumers of those goods, right? Which is for me like very different from what we're trying to do here in Bitcoin, where we're trying to give people responsibility over their own money, right? The kind of value that they earn in their life. And for me, that requires a very different mindset. So, I look back at a career which has been spent mostly, kind of building products in that VC kind of world, and I really feel it's quite different from what I'm doing now. So, whether I can't say that I had a conscious sort of thought to go and build it this way, but it certainly Sparrow is, the design that I kind of wanted to build was to, give somebody who really took that responsibility seriously and sort of wanted to take ownership of their life, of their money, not kind of put it into the hands of others who can do whatever they want with it, and give them the tools to be able to really know what's going on, to like not hide anything, but still make it easy enough to use, so they don't have to go down to the command line or, use UIs that are just very obtuse. So yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely a different thing that we're trying to build here.
Yeah, and I guess hiding too much stuff can be very fast dangerous. And we, as you said, we are talking to people who want to take back the ownership and the control over their money, and they should realize that it's not easy, that there are risks, and they have to do choices in educated ways. And yeah, hiding too much stuff can just lead to mistakes and overconfidence.
Yeah, I tend to agree, which is why I'm a big advocate for both of your projects. So, I mean, with all that said, I mean, first of all, classic disclaimer. I don't want our audience to get overwhelmed when it comes to privacy and security. It is a constant step improvement. You should just constantly be seeking to improve yourself. The number one thing is to realize how much information you're really leaking out there, and the reality is that we are leaking tons and tons of information on a daily basis, not just in Bitcoin land, but also in Bitcoin land. In Bitcoin, it's extra dangerous because real money is on the line, and the Bitcoin blockchain is presumably forever if we are correct. This chain will last longer than any of us will last. And it will have a record of all the transactions there. So mistakes you make today can be used against you in the future, and we should assume they will be used against you in the future. And if you mix that with the growing surveillance state, both on the government side and the corporate surveillance side, and the mix together of those two entities, those two forces of surveillance together, you combine that with Bitcoin information, and all of a sudden, our financial transactions are an open book. So it's really important that Bitcoiners today start realizing how important this is and start taking steps to improve their processes. So with all that said, I mean, let's just jump into the weeds. I mean, I have a list here of things that Craig mentioned that I would love to talk about. And then there's a bunch of different things we can talk about. But before we get started, we had this recent scare with Spectre Wallet, another project that aims to interface with your node and use it with hardware wallets. So similar target market as Sparrow. What's really cool about the two of them is you can use them interchangeably because they operate on the same standards. So if you're, for instance, running a nodl and you have it connected to Spectre, you can also connect that nodl to Sparrow and use it with the same devices. So it allows you to switch between the different projects relatively painlessly. It also lets you verify what each is showing you if you're running two separate machines, one with Sparrow plus a node, whether that's Bitcoin Core or Electrum Server, and one with Spectre plus a node. So with Spectre, very popular project. My main go-to guide in terms of getting started with self-sovereign storage is using a cold card plus Spectre. Their Windows binary they had a scare with. So during the build process of building that Windows install file, that Windows application file, the .exe, they were afraid that they did it on an infected machine and it carried a Trojan. So we've talked about on the show in the past about how users should verify PGP signatures to make sure that, for instance, Craig actually built the Sparrow binary that you're installing. But in this case, if the Spectre vulnerability was true, which it turned out to be a false alarm, it wasn't, verifying the PGP signatures alone wouldn't have done anything for you. It wouldn't have protected you because the Spectre developer actually did build that binary and signed it with his actual PGP key. It just had they just thought that maybe a Trojan had slipped into that build process, so it wouldn't have protected you on the PGP side. So I'm curious, both of you guys ship software. I guess we'll start with Craig. How do you feel? Like, did this wake you up at all to your build processes? Is this something that you're actively considering before it happened? How do you view like your relationship with your users in turn? I mean, obviously they could build from source, but the overwhelming majority of users are probably not building from source and probably will never build from source. So how do you view that when you threat model that out for you and your users?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, first of all, I just want to say, I think Spectre guys handled it very, very well. They were fully upfront with it and kind of pulled that particular binary down until they found that it was actually sort of a false positive from some antivirus, I think. I think what you need to do is to really just make sure that the build environment that you're using is sort of clean. I think that's really clear, and that's something which I think I'm doing pretty well, but I can always be better. So just making sure that the kind of machines that final binary is built on just have absolutely zero chance of, well, as little chance as you can get of some kind of infection trying to creep in. I think from in the particular world of Java that I work in, it's going to be pretty hard because the Java builds are just extremely, I don't know how to say it, but they're just very sort of basically put together in a way that it's really hard for anything alien to be able to come in there. That's not to say that it couldn't happen, and I'm certainly trying to dream up ways in which it could. But I think, largely it's just really about trying to make sure that the build process that you have is good. The second point is really trying to make sure that whatever dependencies you sort of need to bring in order to do the work that you're doing, that you have a very clear idea of what they are. So, when I build, look at something that I need to add some kind of a new software lib to add to be able to get a new feature in, what I do is I see, well, what else is that thing trying to bring in? And if it's too much, then I just won't use it. And it's really just it's not only about trying to get the size of the binary down, but it's also just about trying to make sure that you understand that when that binary is built, you know what size it should be. And you can look through it and just kind of eyeball it and say, okay, yes, this makes sense. All of those files are correct. So those kind of things is also things that you can do. I think ultimately, the more people that look at it, the more people that build, ultimately getting deterministic builds is a great step forward as well. We're all trying to work towards that, but companies like Apple make it very hard. Those I guess are my sort of headline thoughts, Matt.
So I mean, yeah, I guess well, first of all, Keto, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would like to go back a little to what actually happened. Like, um, when I've seen this alert, my first thought were like, it's pretty unlikely it's not a false positive actually, because the two ways it could have happened is or the build machine itself being infected, and if you check the signature of this of what matched in this antivirus, if I remember correctly, it's a ransomware, so you usually notice that on your computer. And second possibility would be someone else uploading a malicious binary to the repository with a correct signature, which is even less likely. And it's not like we don't have a history of open source projects, especially crypto and privacy related, that trigger antiviruses. So, yeah, of course, from outside it was impossible to judge 100%, but it was pretty. The probability was pretty high that it was a false positive, especially coming from one or two antiviruses out of 20 different ones.
So
Yep.
Craig mentioned deterministic builds, reproducible builds.
So that was my second point. Like, we at Nodo we don't deliver almost any binaries. It's all interpreted code, so you can read the code that is actually executed anyway. But if we were to deliver any binaries, deterministic builds are definitely the way to go, because you can, like, in your build chain, you could have two totally separate environments, two different computers building the binary and compare it at the end. If it matches, then you can assume your computers are fine and the binary is fine. If one of them is different, you can assume that one of these two computers are doing something strange. Also, like, try to avoid using any stuff pulled from external repositories, not only dependencies, but for example, if you're using like a base OS Docker image in your build, this image can very well be can be compromised. I don't recall exactly, but I think there were some occurrences when some images on the Docker Hub, like official images, were compromised with something already. That already happened. So yeah, like, really control your strip your build environment to the bare minimum. For example, when I'm building even for tests, like BTC Pay Server on my local development machine, I run the build itself in a virtual machine, which is like the base OS with nothing in it, only .NET and the source code, and I build it there. Yeah, like, just have full control, and as Craig said, like, on Windows and Mac, obviously it's more complicated than on Linux.
I mean,
Especially if you want to have signed binaries.
Most people should start at least playing around with a cheap Linux machine. Get a cheap Dell or ThinkPad or something. Install. I like Pop OS as a learner Linux distro, and at least start trying to get comfortable with it. Maybe with the ideal goal long term to make that your dedicated Bitcoin machine. I think we're doing it again, and we're going to do it many times in this discussion where we jump into the weeds very hard, and I want to be able to pull us back every time we do that. To go to talk about something that's actionable for the average user to protect themselves. The multi-sig approach that both Spectre and Sparrow have focused on do seem to mitigate this concern a bit. Obviously, if there was a Trojan, you would still have a privacy risk, which Craig talks about a lot of times, specifically with the default setup that a lot of people use on Spectre, which I'm guilty of recommending as well, where you run core directly on the same machine. So you do have all your transaction information is on that machine. So you do have a privacy risk there. But if you're using multi-sig with hardware wallets, the different hardware wallets, and you're verifying the transaction information on your actual devices before you sign them, it would mitigate this risk, right?
Yeah, as long as you can do that. I think I'm not sure all hardware wallets allow you to do that yet. And maybe Craig can help me on that, but I think some of them just don't show anything meaningful when you do multi-sig.
Yeah, they're gradually getting there, and I think they're getting there pretty fast. I've just had a sort of a new batch of the sort of newer ones arrive at my desk, and definitely multi-sig is becoming a must-have. So those that don't do it well, I think will need to up their game pretty fast in order to stay in the game.
But at a high level, what we're trying to do there as a broader community is reduce single points of failure, right? So even if Spectre or Sparrow is compromised, you would basically need a combination of that and a plurality of your hardware devices and user error in order to lose funds in that kind of situation, right?
That's right, Matt. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's the sort of goal that we all trying to work, towards, and we don't have to get there on day one, as we say, but so long as people are kind of learning all the time about the different factors that go into that, it's definitely something that can be done. I mean, I like to say that if you are using single sig with a cold card, you basically understand 70% of what you need to know to move to a multi-sig. It's not that much harder, and I'm not trying to push people there. I think that people need to kind of get there in their own time, but it's often made out to be like this giant leap beyond a single sig setup, and I don't think it really is anymore. It was for sure, but it's not so much anymore. It can definitely be reached.
I mean, if anything, the more difficult aspect is then going and securing all those individual backups, right? It's just more things mentally that you're dealing with. But at the same time, that's kind of a feature, not a bug, right? I mean, if any of those individual backups get compromised, it's better, obviously, than if you have a single sig backup get compromised.
Yeah, so the way I like to think about it is, if you have a mental load anyway, because you're going to bed and you're kind of worried that the single sig setup is sitting there with all the cash on it, and you are concerned, and you kind of, it's keeping you up a little bit at night, whenever you think about it, you're like, I've got a bit of a worry there, price has gone up, then you're already carrying that kind of mental load. And multi-sig just takes that away, right? Now you're thinking to yourself, there's like zero chance. I've got these backups, they're in different locations. Somebody could come here right now and demand it all, and I could just say, sorry, it can't happen. So for me, it's really about trying to balance the mental load, and you'll know when you are carrying that sort of load, and when you need to seek out the peace of mind that multi-sig can bring.
Right. And just to be clear here, I mean, in terms of accessibility, the fact that I have both of you on is fantastic because, I mean, if you're a new user and you buy a Nodl and you plug it in and you update it and then you connect it to ideally a dedicated laptop or desktop with Sparrow Wallet running, that's a relatively easy, accessible setup process. And all of a sudden, you have a more secure way of using Bitcoin than the 99% of people out there. And the fact that exists, that capability exists in a relatively accessible way is absolutely understated. I think people don't realize how far we've come. 2 years ago, that kind of setup would have been way, way, way less accessible to the average user. So I have a bunch of, I have like 6 different people who privately messaged me telling me that I shouldn't schedule Citadel dispatches during Euro 2020. As far as I'm concerned, freaks, Euro 2020 using Bitcoin Tuesdays to do games is a state attack. So that tournament will be over soon. Like I said, the archives are always available. You are missed if you're not in the live chat right now. The live chat is what makes this great. But there's really nothing we could do about that. And I'm just glad that we're still having these great conversations about Bitcoin. So let's jump into this. So we have BIP47 on the list to discuss. BIP47 is this reusable payment code that allows individuals to accept the main use case to me, and the Samurai guys will disagree with me, is for easily accepting donations. And I had Alex Gladstein from Chief Strategy Officer of HRF last week, and it's work that I've been doing with him on the sidelines in terms of getting activists to be able to easily accept Bitcoin without running, quite frankly, without running BTC Pay server on some, server somewhere, which a lot of times requires KYC, has overhead costs, has its own privacy concerns that you have to deal with in terms of trying to obtain a server without KYCing yourself. I know Kita Miner has a side project that allows you to do that using Bitcoin, but that's not really my point here. The cool thing about BIP47 is that you have this, you just have this text string that you can post in a Twitter bio or something like that, and people can donate to you without reusing the same address. Now, unfortunately, the biggest trade-off that we have to deal with BIP47 right now is Samurai Wallet is the only ones who have implemented it. And if you don't have wide wallet support, specifically Samurai Wallet is only Android. As far as I'm concerned, people should, if they're an iPhone user, they should consider switching from iPhone. But if they don't want to switch from iPhone, they should buy a cheap Pixel and use it as their dedicated Samurai device. But as a project at Citadel Dispatch that's trying to really adopt the ethos of free open source software and not have advertisements, we're heavily donation based, and we're constantly seeking out alternatives to how we can accept donations. And one of the issues to me with BIP47 is that if I post this payment code, there's only one wallet where people can donate from. And so instead I've opted for LNURL. I've adopted, these podcasting 2.0 apps. But they have similar issues. There's not all Lightning wallets support it. So what we really want to see is we want to see broad adoption of all of these standards. But we're focusing on BIP47 here, which is on-chain, allows you to do, many donations, many payments to a known text string without reusing addresses. I know, Craig, you've been pretty decently outspoken about considering integrating it into Sparrow Wallet. I'm curious on what your thoughts are there around it and whether or not you think it's a good fit for Sparrow.
Yeah, so let me take a step back, Matt, and first of all, just kind of talk about what I actually wanted to do here was just help the freaks understand, why I think we're only seeing it in one wallet to date, right? Because there's been a lot of kind of rumors and ideas going on around, why have so few wallets built this thing in. So, here's the perspective of a dev who's been trying to do it, trying to look into it. And I just kind of wanted to, without trying to say it's good or bad or anything, actually, just trying to say, like, here's the challenges that are incurred when you try and build against this particular spec. In order to do this, I'm going to have to dive into a few technical details, but hopefully it will be not too bad and I won't go too deep into it.
Let's go deep. I'm down.
Alrighty. So with BIP47, you've got what are now 4 versions of this particular spec. We're going to go through the different versions because I think it's useful and I think it's valid. You kind of have to understand where this thing has come from in order to understand where it's going. So version 1, which was released back in 2015, so it's been around a while, So we have these, as Matt described, we have these payment codes. Everyone who has a BIP47 capable wallet can get a payment code. And with that payment code, somebody who wants to pay you can send a special transaction with a certain kind of output called an return output. And if they do that, then basically what happens is that there's this private wallet, which is your wallet as the owner of the BIP47 wallet. It's like your own kind of a new wallet that you would create. But it's only visible, or at least the addresses are only visible to the person who's trying to pay you, to the person who created this output, which is called a notification output, right? So that's what basically how BIP47 works. Now, the first thing to be aware of is that when you create this output that sets this whole thing up, you are probably going to have some change from it, because this particular output has no real value attached to it. It's just kind of got a very minimal amount to it. So that change amount that gets sent back has a certain privacy risk attached to it. Okay, so if you are now using that change output and you use it to pay someone else, they can then look back at that change output, link it back to the payment code that you sent this notification output to, and then they can tell that you want to create that link. So there is a bit of privacy leakage there. And what the spec advises, or suggests at least, is that that change output should be coin joined. Now, that implies, I mean, they don't say it must be, but you can see that's why they would advise it. Now, that implies that a wallet needs to have access to a coin join, kind of sort of
some
feature.
kind of collaborative transaction tool built into the wallet.
That's it. So, so that's one thing that, you right kind of off the bat, as you begin, you kind of realize, okay, well, that's something that we'll have to think about how we're going to build. Now, once this link has been created, what happens is that you, as the receiver of the payments, basically have this new wallet. And this new wallet, you have to then have a set of addresses, which you create up to the gap limit, which is usually, sort of 20. And that allows you to receive, then the payee, the person who's trying to send you the donation, can then create an address, which you will then receive the money for. And nobody else in the world will be able to know that they then sent, that sort of Bitcoin transaction to you. Now, every time that you receive a new notification output that someone creates this link, you get a new wallet with a new set of addresses attached to it. Now, there's some interesting things to think about when you're trying to build against this, right? So all HD wallets, all kind of BIP32 wallets, you currently have to support two lists of addresses. You have to support the receive addresses and the change addresses, right? And these are lists that grow in length over time. So adding one of these BIP47 wallets, whenever you create this link, is basically a new list. And this has this kind of list of addresses that have all the UTXOs that hang off them, is the major kind of data store and server kind of load that you have to place on any wallet. So it's quite a big thing that you're now taking a number which is bounded at 2 and you're making it into a longer kind of list, right? So that's something that a wallet dev needs to think about. For example, right now, if you are using the current Electris build and you open 3 or 4 decent sized wallets, it's going to really start to battle. Now, the new version which is coming out is going to make that better, but it's still something to think about, because what makes it struggle is the number of subscribed addresses that you have. Every subscribed address, whenever there's a new transaction that comes in on the mempool, it needs to be matched against that particular wallet. And you're trying to see, well, does this apply to my wallet or not? And the more of those addresses that you add is the more load that server has to bear. So it is something that you need to think about. And you also, as the owner of the BIP47 wallet, have no control, obviously, over the number of times somebody opens one of these kind of links, right?
So you have to almost assume it's infinite, right? Because you're going to, if I publicly post my payment code, with Samurai, it's called Paynim, like an attacker can just come in and create a bunch of different relationships, right?
Correct. So, I'm not trying to say it's bad or good. In fact, I can't see any other way to do it. But I'm just trying to say these are the things that one has to think about when trying to build against it. The last thing I want is that somebody fires up, Sparrow wallet and the thing just doesn't work, right? That's not a situation which I can have. So I do need to consider, as I build this, how do I deal with that? Then getting back to the fact we're still on version 1 here, we're still looking at the old legacy pay to pub key hash outputs, which means that if you are using a nice native SegWit wallet, you will have to receive on these old style addresses. That means that your Sparrow wallet now has to either understand different script types, or you just need to actually, when you set up your wallet, have an old script type and incur the higher fees that comes with that. So those are a few thoughts around version 1. Now, version 2, we can skip past because it uses Bloom filters, which we don't really have in Bitcoin anymore. So we can move on to version 3. The nice thing about version 3 is that it takes away this kind of op return output, which was a big part of why I think people didn't go for BIP47 at the start. And what it replaces it with is a bare multisig 1 of 3 output. And what that means is that you have basically a transaction output that you can slide into any other transaction that you have. So you don't have to create a specific, kind of very easy to identify, link. Instead you can just add it to any other kind of Bitcoin transaction that you're making, and it can appear fairly, these outputs are not common, but at least it's not something completely unique. However, there is an issue with this, right? And I didn't actually realize this until I kind of read the spec about three times. But one of the issues here is that you actually need to listen for a key within the output script. You can't kind of listen to the output script as a whole. You have to listen to just a part of it. Now, server protocols are just not generally designed for this. So Bitcoin Core can't do this today. Electrum servers can't do this today. What the author, Justice, has basically, his kind of approach to this is to use BIP157, which is the BIP for complex block filters, the successor to Bloom. And he's basically created an enhanced filter, which allows you to then look inside the script. So it's almost like saying, here's the middle part of the address, and we just want to match on characters, 10 to 20, right? We don't want to care about the other ones on either side. And that's quite a challenge. Now, as far as I know, and I might be wrong, this particular filter has not been added to Bitcoin Core. So if you wanted to go and do this today, I'm not sure that you could. Again, this is just me trying to figure it out. So this is one of the issues trying to overcome with version 3. Assuming that we can do this with version 3, you then have these lists of addresses, which you then need to listen for again. But in version 3, you need to listen to 3 different script types. You need to listen to pay to pub key. You need to listen to the kind of native SegWit version that we all hopefully use today. And you need to listen to pay to pub key hash, which is the old version 1. So you now have not only an unbounded list of these lists of sort of addresses that you need to listen to, but you multiply that by 3 as well. So that does increase the load. Now, I was a bit concerned about this, so Justice and I had a chat, and it resulted in version 4 of this spec, of the BIP 4047 spec, which is now has a different name, but it's the same thing. And that is basically where one only has to listen to a native SegWit list. So now we're just down to basically the kind of the kind of unbounded list, but there's only one script type rather than 3. And that's kind of where I am, trying to figure this entire thing out. I hope, I kind of hope that that's helpful for people to understand that these things are not necessarily easy to do. It's been one of the more challenging areas that I've been trying to work on to try and figure it out. So, yeah, I hope that made some sense.
No, I mean, that was extremely insightful. I appreciate you going through your thought process in terms of integrating it with Sparrow. I mean, from my understanding, a group of core developers in the BIP 47 V1 said that they don't think it should be implemented. And the main two arguments that I've heard, or my understanding of them, my basic understanding of them, is the first main argument is that notification transaction is an inefficient use of block space. We are streaming mempool.space right now, a live view of mempool, of mempools, at least their specific mempool, but I know my mempool also matches what they're showing right now. And, we're sitting at Bitcoin at over $30,000. Adoption is supposedly higher than it's ever been. And mempools are completely empty right now. So I don't think that block space is a very good argument against using it. And if anything, if BIP 47 helps create a fee market, then in the future, you can have more efficient versions of it. And then the second thing was, you could have I think they called it mystery shopper attack, where someone sends Bitcoin UTXOs to your payment code and then tries to track those payments, which to me is just inherently an issue with accepting any Bitcoin payments publicly. I mean, on BTC Pay Server, that's the number one way that you would try and de-anonymize someone's BTC Pay Server. If we're going to go from a framing of an activist or something in an authoritarian country, accepting Bitcoin donations through a public BTC Pay Server, I would expect their government to send Bitcoin donations, fake Bitcoin, well, real Bitcoin, but Bitcoin donations into that BTC Pay Server, and then try and track you spending those, and maybe watch for a user making a mistake in terms of combining UTXOs after the fact and using the common input ownership heuristic to tell that if there's 2 inputs, 3 inputs in a transaction, they're probably all owned by the same person, which kind of goes hand in hand with what you said earlier, which is almost like, if you want to implement this in a safe way, you need to have a full suite of tools. You need to have coin control with labeling, where people can actually choose which UTXOs they spend and keep track of them. And then collaborative transaction tools, whether that's uncoordinated 2-person coin joins, pay joins, or coordinated coin joins, something like Whirlpool. So you kind of need to have all the different bases. But even if you don't, do we agree that receiving payments through a BIP 47 payment code is strictly better than the status quo, which is probably just posting an address and reusing that address over and over again?
Yeah, of course, Matt. There's no doubt. Yeah, look, I mean, I've seen people quote what some people said way back when. I don't think it's really all that material. I would hope that wallet devs today are not depending on the opinions of that were said many years ago and have probably been somewhat mis sort of quoted anyway. I think we should all just think for ourselves. And I guess my point of view is just coming from, let's actually try and build this thing and see what how close we can get to actually doing so. So yeah, I just kind of feel that Bitcoin Core gets quite a lot of flack for it, but it's really immaterial. It's, we should all just look at the spec, and if you want to build it, build it.
Well, I mean, I think, in reality, there's always shades of gray. But there's definitely validity in an argument that there is a small group of developers that most people follow, that other developers follow in terms of what they should be prioritizing and what they should be working on, and we do, as Bitcoiners, fall into victim of groupthink in that regard, like a almost level of appeal to authority, and for better or worse, like, I think one of the most valuable aspects of Bitcoin is the culture around core development in terms of being ultra conservative. But when we're looking at, I went on a bit of a tirade on Twitter today. Like, when you're looking at the reality of Bitcoin right now, the overwhelming majority of people are using it in the least private way possible, which is custodial exchanges. And then the few that are actually removing themselves from custodial exchanges are constantly reusing addresses. They're not using their own node. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be improved just by offering, better, more user-friendly tools to users, right? My tirade specifically today was like the Glassnode charts that show, like, they call it accumulation addresses, which are addresses that are constantly receiving Bitcoin, and they're stacking, right? And I've had people tag me and they're like, "Oh, Matt, like, this is a chart showing everyone stacking sats." And it's like, no, this is a chart of people that don't listen to the show for the last 3 years and are still reusing addresses. And to me, it's a bearish chart when we see, 600,000 addresses all reusing constantly. I'm curious what I want to get to Keto, but before I get to Keto, Craig, I'm like, how does native taproot addresses fall into your thought process here with BIP47?
That's actually really interesting, Matt. I don't have a great answer for you, but I'm hoping that the signature algorithms in there will make it easier to get this this kind of key exchange done. And I'm not deep enough into Taproot yet to be sure that is the case, so I don't want to say that it is. But I believe that there might be some scope in terms of the way the signing is done and the way the signatures are tweaked, that we might be able to get some kind of easier and more hidden kind of methods there to be able to do it. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things that I still need to get my head more into.
But in the short term, I mean, that would be just another set of addresses that you're going to have to track, right? That the wallet's going to have to track and the node's going to have to track.
Correct. I mean, that's the way BIP47 works. I think that the servers that we run are getting more powerful with time. And I'm sure Keto will have some ideas on this. He has to deal with this stuff all the time. I guess we just kind of have to find a way to do it that doesn't put too much load, for example, on the public servers that are being run. We don't want those to fall over. We don't want people to kind of just have this unbounded kind of list that just grows and grows, and eventually their kind of home node will fall over. I don't think that that's going to happen off the bat. I think it would take quite a while for that to actually occur, but it is still a concern that you have to at least think about at the offset.
If anything, it's the bigger concern for the public nodes, no? Because I mean, like, maybe if you're Uncle Jimming and you're, to me, it'd be the most bullish thing ever if I had like 100 close friends and family using my node. Like, we're not even close to that, but I mean, if I'm running Electris on a nodl, I mean, Keto Miner, let's get you in here. Like, if I'm running Electris on on a Nodl, and I'm using it, and I have like 5 or 10 family members, and they're all using it with BIP47. Like, we're not even close to that overhead being a bottleneck for us, right?
Well, I'm not sure. Sometimes only running a pretty heavy Electrum wallet against Electrum Rust server and running Lightning at the same time doesn't work when the mempo is heavy or stuff like that. So, yeah, I think anything requiring constant tracking of transactions is becoming a bigger and bigger issue as time goes. There are some solutions that seem to do it in a smoother way, like the NB Explorer library used by BTC Pay Server. That's a pretty good tracker. It's actually very lightweight, and it was built from the beginning to track thousands of addresses. So maybe the answer is somewhere in between, like some tracking middleware that wouldn't be a full Electron server, but would be interfaced with Bitcoin Core only for tracking transactions. I don't know.
Okay, so I mean, that's just something that we're just going to constantly be up against then, right? Is trying to reduce that overhead in terms of both server usage, but also both on the efficiency side of whatever you're running on your server, plus the efficiency side of whatever's hitting the server, right?
Yeah.
To me,
at the end of the day, you always need to track these addresses or transactions or whatever you are looking for. So the best thing you can do is to do it in the most efficient way. And yeah, I guess, like, from a purely server overhead point of view, having a BTC Pay server for donations is probably lighter than running your own BIP47 server.
Yeah, but I mean, you wouldn't. So with Samurai's implementation, they have a shorter code. So you have your payment code, and then your payment code is just reliant on your own node. And then they have a shorter code that's like a username lookup, a randomly generated username, which is the payname. And they manage that server, but that's just a lookup for your payment code, right?
That's right, yeah.
So you're really, when you're using BIP47 with Samurai with your own dojo, you're running your own BIP47 server. You're running your own payment code server.
As far as I know, Matt, I'm not precisely sure how they do it, but they've obviously made it work, so it can be done. And we all just kind of need to understand that it's not a hill that can't be climbed. It's just we need to kind of try and figure out the ways to do it. I'd be really interested to know how they are implementing version 3. Hopefully I can ask them a little bit more about that, because that's kind of the biggest barrier to me right now is, how do we get past this need to not only scan for lots of addresses, but to actually scan within a particular output script and to find a particular key within an output script. Because as I say, Bitcoin Core, you can't do that today. Electrum server, you basically create a script hash, which is you basically just hash the output script. So, you can't do that with just part of it. So, how they're doing that, I presume it's using the sort of compact block filters. But if those haven't been built into Core, I'm not super familiar with how many people have turned compact block filters on when they install their node. Is that a default setting? I don't think it is. And if so, this particular enhancement that the author of BIP47 has put forward, is that supported? Though that's kind of where I am, I guess, with my. So I'm sure I'm going to get educated soon.
I'm curious, Keto, do you have any insight here? My understanding is that Dojo is, you started it with Nodl before they implemented it, but Dojo now they're not using filters at all. They're not using block filters at all. It's Electris. They're running Electris if you run Dojo.
Yeah. They use Electros inside the Dojo stack. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And just to answer Craig, so compact filters are not enabled by default, indeed, and they are pretty recent in the mainstream core. They were not in Luke's fork, and I think they were merged finally in the mainstream core in 0.21.
Luke specifically put it in knots for Wasabi, and then Wasabi implemented knots as built-in package for Wasabi, so that they could get the
we
block
were
filters.
actually running knots until Bitcoin Core 0.21 for our Lightning backends because we are running Neutrino with our own private servers.
That's interesting. So I mean, look, everything has trade-offs. Just to go back, like one of the things I mentioned is one of the most valuable aspects of Bitcoin to me is this culture among core development to be as conservative as possible. But we don't have that same culture with Lightning, and I think that's probably for the better. It's a quicker development process with different trade-offs set up, but the result is that a lot of the negatives that people have mentioned about these on-chain aspects, a perfect example is that change during the BIP47 notification process that you say, Craig, needs to be coin joined, which it should be, are trade-offs that are made every day by every Lightning user. I mean, I just saw Nifty Nay, C Lightning developer with Blockstream, on the mailing list saying that every UTXO that you connect to a Lightning node should be coin joined first. So these are trade-offs that they're actively making. So to me, to have on-chain tools that are making similar trade-offs isn't the end of the world. It's better to have those in our tool set. We have IFH in the live chat asking what is the easiest way for someone to accept Lightning donations in a static way. And you basically have two options right now. You either can use LN bits to create an LN URL with your own node, or you can use LN transaction bot. We had Fiat Jaff on the show a couple weeks ago, maybe over a month ago, who's the maintainer of that. That is custodial, right? And that's another trade-off you're making. You're trusting him with your privacy and your funds, but if you're constantly pulling those funds off of that custodial wallet, it might not be the worst trade-off in the world, but it is a trade-off. And I think rather than focusing on perfect, when it comes to user-focused tools, not the protocol, I understand that we should be as conservative as possible, but when it comes to actual user tools, it's good to have many different options with different trade-offs. I think people will use those, and it's super helpful. For IFH, to be clear, that static LN URL is what I have in the bottom left-hand corner, that QR code. So if you scan that QR code with supporting wallets, unfortunately, not all Lightning wallets support it. But if you scan that with a supporting wallet, it'll allow you to pay whatever you want to pay. And you can also include a memo, which is really cool. I have people donate to the show, and they give me feedback in their donation. So I take your feedback more seriously if your donation's higher. I'm just, yeah, so that's cool. Okay, so BIP47, Sparrow's going to implement it soon. He's just, Craig's just working on the specifics, right, Craig?
Absolutely, Matt.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. So let's jump into Whirlpool, because you can't implement BIP47 unless you have some kind of collaborative transaction tools. What do you want to focus on with Whirlpool here? I mean, you put it on the docket to discuss.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess actually I have, really some questions is, do people kind of view it as winning the coin join implementation? Is that an idea that makes any sense? Because, one of the things that I really like about it is the fact that you can see the amount of unspent capacity. Now, before the show, I was trying to find the same kind of figure for Join Market and for Wasabi, and I couldn't. I don't know if it's just that my skills weren't enough to figure that thing out. But over 3,000 Bitcoin in sort of unspent capacity is pretty good. And it just kind of seems to me that they have figured out the incentive model behind this in a way that the other implementations haven't necessarily, done. What do you guys think?
So, I mean, obviously, this is a topic that I've been pretty focused on. I mean, you can look up stats for the other CoinJoin implementations. If you go to whirlpoolstats.com, it redirects to @Typerble's tracking website, and he tracks Whirlpool volume, Join Market volume, and Wasabi volume. It's really apples and oranges. You can't really compare Whirlpool unspent capacity to these other volume numbers. And the reason is because the way Samurai has set up their CoinJoin implementation is they've set it up so that you have this structured liquidity pool. And that's what this unspent capacity pool is. And the cool part about that is it feels like a tangible goal that we can work towards increasing that liquidity pool. And the difference is when you use something like Whirlpool, when you use Whirlpool, the way their Sybil mechanism works is you pay less fees the more money you send in at a given time. And that's that transaction zero. When you send in the transaction zero, your fees are flat based on which pool you decide to join. And then those transactions, if let's say you're going into the million sat pool in Whirlpool, and you go in with 5 million sats, or a little bit over 5 million sats, because you have to pay the Whirlpool fee. So you go in with a little bit over than 5 million sats, you're going to have 7 UTXOs are going to get created. You're going to have 5 million. You're going to have 5 1 million sat UTXOs going into Whirlpool. You're going to have 1 UTXO that is paying your Whirlpool fee to the Samurai developers. And then you're going to have 1 UTXO, which is your change output, which is underneath. It's whatever is left over that couldn't fit into that 1 million sat denomination. And then those 5 UTXOs are going into 5 different rounds of CoinJoin. They're not in the same round. None of them are allowed to be in the same round. And that's that Sybil mechanism involved. Then once you've entered this CoinJoin pool, it sits in there. And as long as you're running Whirlpool, which you can run 24/7 very easily with Nodl or Ronin Dojo or Umbrel, they will constantly provide remix. They'll constantly be remixing in that pool to any new users who join that pool. And the idea is to try and interconnect all those mixes. Every single round can be traced on the blockchain all the way back to the first Whirlpool mix that ever happened. And they should be able to go forward from that point as long as at least one participant out of those 5 UTXOs that are in each round goes on to another round. So even if you don't, ideally you should be actively keeping Whirlpool on, but even if you don't, as long as other participants in your round are constantly in Whirlpool and constantly providing liquidity, the probability of which UTXO is yours grows with the set, right? Like you're intermixed into the set. And it's this idea of creating this like structured liquidity pool that is provides as much privacy as possible for a new user who just comes in and maybe only does one round. Like they should really be doing more rounds, but if they just do one round, like they should have, a lower, like a harder chance, a harder probability, a lower probability of guessing which UTXO is theirs when they come out, because it's connected to the previous mixes and the future mixes. So it feels like a tangible goal of something we can work towards. And the result there is, as more users are entering the system, over time, your anonymity set shouldn't degrade. This idea of you're one of 1,000 people or one of 2,000 people or one of 4,000 people. In these other implementations, specifically Wasabi, your anonymity set tends to degrade over time. So if you do like a round and you're in Wasabi and you do a round with 70 people, and 65 of those people end up sending to a KYC exchange or combining their outputs afterwards and then sending to a KYC exchange or whatever, doxing their coins in some way, your anonymity set is being ruined over time and you don't even realize. So this idea of the unspent capacity is a very cool metric to me. It's also a metric that can't be easily gamed, because every UTXO in that unspent capacity calculation is something that's sitting there in post Whirlpool. You can't then recycle it back through and get counted twice. But if you're going at just naive volume numbers, you can recycle UTXOs and just keep sending them back in. And now that will cost you money. But if you are the coordinated coin joins, like if you're the one running the coordinated coin joins, in this case Wasabi doesn't have to pay that coin join fee. So I'm not accusing them of doing it, but I'm just saying that you basically, without that unspent capacity metric, if you're looking at just pure Wasabi volumes, you're trusting that they're not constantly recycling volume through their coin joins, right? Because the unspent capacity is literally transactions that are sitting there in post Whirlpool UTXO. So yes, the Samurai devs could be inflating that number with their own UTXOs, but they can only do it once. They can't constantly recycle it to increase that number. So to me, the unspent capacity is a very tangible number. It's a harder to game number, and it's something that we've been very focused on on Rabbit Hole Recap. We talk about it the beginning of every episode. On top of that, what's cool about Whirlpool is it was made from the get-go. It was built from the get-go to share that liquidity pool with other wallet developers. And the reason for that is because we don't have many people using CoinJoin, period, right now. Like one of the biggest promoters of CoinJoin. There's no way for me to tell exactly how many people are using CoinJoin, but across the 3 implementations, I can safely say that it's less than 10,000 people, right? It's not that many people are using CoinJoin. And it's further split between those 3 implementations. Some people are using Join Market, some people are using Wasabi, some people are using Whirlpool. And so that small anonymity set that we already have of 10,000 people, or less than 10,000 people, is further split. So the individual privacy you get of any of the individual tools is reduced. So what we want to see is CoinJoin get added to every wallet, and we want to see them sharing liquidity pools would be the ideal. And just to be clear to listeners who are watching the live stream, the reason the live chat just got erased was because there was some scammer who posted something. So I deleted the live chat, blocked him, and then repopped it up just to let you know. So where I'm getting at here is they set up Whirlpool in a way that if you integrate it into Sparrow Wallet, they will give you a cut of all fees that come in through Sparrow. So you can monetize your wallet in an ethical way without adding fiat on-ramps or what other elements that Bitcoin wallets or ads that Bitcoin or tracking that Bitcoin wallets add to try and monetize. So you can monetize your wallet while providing your users better privacy. And the main negative that people have against Whirlpool is that you can use it without your own node. And in that case, Samurai knows your XPubs. They don't know your IP address because it defaults to Tor, but they know your XPubs. And if there's a subset, if there's a majority of people that are using it without their own node, then Samurai can reverse construct and remove that anonymity set that you think you have that you don't, because they know all the different addresses of the non-node users. But if Sparrow Wallet adds it, and Blue Wallet adds it, and Ledger adds it, and all these different wallets add it, maybe not all users will use their own node, but because there'll be different nodes that are being used by the light users, it splits up that threshold of the amount of people that are using it. So it makes, not only does it increase the overall usage and anonymity set of all Whirlpool users, it also removes, it mitigates that main concern that a lot of people have, that you have these light client users that are trusting Samurai with their address history. Does any of this make sense? That I've been talking for a while.
Well, that was great, Matt. Thank you. Certainly got a lot from that, and I'm definitely looking at Whirlpool. It's, I think, becoming clear to me, at least, that it's certainly the most recommended coin join that I'm seeing. Just kind of out there, and I think there's a lot to be said for the highest kind of liquidity pool, providing them the largest anonymity sets. So that kind of makes a lot of sense. But as I was saying earlier, what I really like about it is the fact that the incentives have been chosen. Just for example, having a flat fee to enter a pool obviously incentivizes you to increase the amount of Bitcoin that you're going to mix, because you're always looking at the ratio between the fee that you spend to the amount that you mix. And if the fee is flat, then you obviously say, well, great, I'm just going to mix as much as I can. So that those kind of clever choices make a lot of sense to me. I think. And I kind of want to get into this as we get further into the chat, but really, privacy only works when it has, I think, additional, kind of incentives, or it's built in a clever way so that you feel like you're winning when you do it. There's something about that. As much as we would like to believe that everyone wants to be private for its own sake, I think that it only really works when it kind of almost becomes part of a bigger package. And I just think
100%.
Yeah.
Incentives are everything. And just to be clear, in terms of providing liquidity, Join Market, nailed the incentive structure for the makers in terms of the people who are providing liquidity. Because you can actually get paid to run Join Market 24/7. With Samurai, you get basically paid in privacy, because your privacy increases the more your liquidity is sitting in there. I would argue that the incentive on the taker side is almost more important, because with Join Market, what we saw is we do have a dedicated, sub-1,000 group of makers that are constantly providing liquidity, because both idealistic reasons and because they can make some money off of it. But if we want to get that total CoinJoin user number, above 10,000, if we want to get it to 50,000 to 100,000 people, you have to make it as accessible as possible for the average user who's not going to be a maker. He's a guy who comes in as a taker and just wants to, pay a little bit of Bitcoin and get better privacy as a result. So the incentives are very important, but also who those incentives are focused on are extra important. And I think, it's definitely a very nuanced topic. I wouldn't go as far as saying that the liquidity pool of Samurai is the largest. Naive raw numbers would say that Wasabi is larger, but like I said, the liquidity pool is not structured well. It's not a strong foundation that Wasabi is built on top of. There's all these different little aspects of the way their implementation works that doesn't incentivize remixing. You have to pay a fee constantly if you're remixing. You get to choose which rounds you participate in, which makes it cheaper for a Sybil attacker. A Sybil attacker pays the same fees that a quote unquote good user or a benevolent actor pays. So it's not as Sybil resistant. And then on top of that, with both of these coordinated CoinJoin implementations, you don't have Sybil resistance from the actual coordinator, because the main Sybil resistance, especially in today's fee market, which we're looking at mempool.space right now, which is just 1 sat per byte, you get into the next block. The main Sybil resistance is the actual CoinJoin fee, which is paid to the coordinator themselves. So in Samurai's case, it's paid to Samurai. In Wasabi's case, it's paid to Wasabi. And both of those coordinators could flood rounds at minimal cost to themselves, except for the miner fees. And if I'm correct in that the fee market will increase, then that becomes less of an issue, because you have the Sybil resistance of the actual transaction fees. We just haven't gotten there, and whatever. I've been eating crow about people give me shit about the 200K price call, but the big one for me is the mempool. Mempools. I did not expect that we were going to get 1 sat per byte right now in 2021, especially amid a alleged minor crackdown in China where hash rate's down a shit ton, and you can just get confirmed to 1 sat per byte. But I think what Samurai is building in terms of the Whirlpool implementation is just a really, really strong foundation that we can work off of. That is really, really good on-chain properties when you look at how it looks on-chain, and the defaults that they have set. And I feel good trying to increase that liquidity. And I think the next step is we need more wallets to basically integrate Whirlpool. And that's what I've been trying to facilitate behind the scenes. And I hope that we'll see some more wallets do it. Specifically, I mean, Sparrow would be absolutely fantastic, one of the best in class desktop wallets, but I would love to see an iPhone wallet add it as well, because I think that's there's just a lot of Bitcoiners that use iPhones, so for better or worse.
So Matt, let me ask you this. If I was to play devil's advocate here, and let's assume that all of these wallets integrate against it, are we not increasing the risk in a way of kind of centralizing all of the implementations on one kind of server endpoint? Does that make any sense?
So there's 2 servers. There's the Samurai Wallet tracking server, which is for Samurai Wallet users that are not using their own node, which is like whatever their modified version of Electris is or whatever they're running. And then there's a separate Whirlpool server. If we have more wallets using Whirlpool, then we are creating a central point of failure on the Whirlpool server in terms of uptime. But that Whirlpool server is blinded. So the Whirlpool server doesn't have there's no privacy risk with that Whirlpool server. Every time you connect to it with a new Tor identity. You're not giving it XPubs, you're serving it individual addresses. So it doesn't add a centralized risk in terms of privacy. It does add basically a denial of service risk in terms of you're going to have, one Whirlpool server, maybe a backup Whirlpool server that is coordinating all of these CoinJoin rounds. But, theoretically, in a worst case scenario, let's say we have Sparrow Wallet and 5 other wallets, 6 other wallets, all using the same Whirlpool liquidity pool. And AMLD 10 comes out or whatever. Like, I think we're on 6 right now, and they're like super aggressive against CoinJoin, and they go after the Samurai team, and they shut down the Whirlpool servers. Someone else can launch their own coordinator through Tor, make it an onion only service, and maybe have some kind of web of trust, ideally a NIM or something that already has a reputation could launch it. But otherwise it'll take some time to get new reputation there. But you can run the Whirlpool server just completely through Onion and not, have it tied to your identity. But the key aspect there is who's ever running that Whirlpool server they're not a privacy risk. They're purely a uptime or they purely just need to be there to coordinate, but they're blind to what's actually happening.
Okay, yeah, no, that I think makes some sense. I think the main thing is, even if the Whirlpool server does somehow get impacted, the fact that we can start it up as a sort of a third-party effort, that makes some sense. I could see how that could work should that unfortunate day ever happen. Okay, good.
But I think that's like the most bullish threat model ever for me, because that means it's heavily being used and gets taken down in that situation. If that situation happens, to me, we're sitting in a way more bullish scenario than I expect otherwise, because it just does not seem like we have that momentum to get it added to more wallets. But I would like to see it added to more wallets. And I think the number one incentive for it to get added to more wallets isn't privacy. And we're talking about incentives here, right? It's that these wallet developers, and this firsthand, Craig, if you're running a free open source wallet, it is very hard to monetize. And, donationware only gets you so far. And if these wallet developers have a way to monetize their wallet in an ethical way that provides them a steady stream of the best money that humans have ever had in Bitcoin, without venture capitalists or any kind of VC funding, that's going to create a positive feedback loop for any wallet developers that ultimately decide to integrate it. That aligns them with their users, and ideally ends up in better maintained, fully fleshed out wallets, because they have this steady source of funding that they can rely on, right?
Yeah, agreed. I think it makes a lot of sense, and that's kind of why I wanted to raise it, just to discuss, because it seems right now that we're sort of starting to emerge from a period where a lot of these implementations have been sparring off against each other, and as I say, for me, just looking at it from the outside, I can see and measure how Whirlpool is growing. Which I can't until you send me this link. But even now, it's still quite difficult. It's quite a struggle to see how the others are growing. And also, I just really like incentive models that kind of work to the benefit of the user who's actually trying to use the product. That makes a lot of sense to me, and that's kind of what translates into success in my world, at least.
Yeah, I mean, so Join Market, which is, I just think no one really should be using Wasabi right now, to be honest. You can go back, people can go back and listen to my episode with Nopara, but they're working on Wasabi 2.0, which is a complete rewrite and a complete change in implementation. And I'll reserve judgment on that when that gets released. It hasn't been released yet. But Join Market is still very effective software. It's hard to use, but they made very different trade-off designs and incentive designs. And the two being is that, first of all, there isn't really a liquidity pool. You're basically individually going through these makers, and each maker is its own liquidity pool almost. You're not really mixed in with everyone else. So you don't have this solid liquidity base to work off of. The UX is getting easier to use, especially we had OpenArms on the show with Join Inbox, which is integrated with Raspberry Blitz. That makes it way easier to use Join Market. But the number one incentive difference is what we just highlighted, which is individual wallet developers have no reason to implement Join Market besides possibly incentivize, hoping that more users will use their wallet because it has Join Market built in. There's no financial incentive for them to add it, but there's a financial incentive for Whirlpool to be added to these wallets, because you're literally making a portion of the fees. It's, between Wasabi and Samurai, it's the first time really that you saw these open source Bitcoin projects that had a steady income from their users that also is not easily, forkable. You can fork it and run your own coordinator, but then you're just in a completely different liquidity pool, and you don't have that liquidity pool to work off of. So you're incentivized to really, work together there and then build that single large liquidity pool, which I really think we need, because there's just not that many users seeking privacy. So we need to amplify as much as possible the users that are.
Yeah, for sure. Yet, Matt, yet we have
Right.
to. Yeah.
I mean, look, we have nearly 3,000 Bitcoin. So just to be clear on these unspent capacity numbers, Clark Moody has a higher number than Hyperbole does, because Clark Moody counts. He counts Whirlpool transactions that are waiting to go into Whirlpool that haven't gone in yet. So they're just sitting in the transaction zero, but they haven't actually gone into Whirlpool yet. While Hyperbole waits till after they go in. But so the range is, I think Hyperbole has it at like 2,400 Bitcoin, and Clark has it at like 3,200. So that's like, there's like 800 Bitcoin getting ready to go into Whirlpool that haven't quite gone in yet. So probably the 2,500 number is like the more accurate number, but regardless, that's a negligible difference in the big scheme of things. I mean, you're talking about someone like Michael Saylor or whatever, who like personally between his company and his own holdings holds over 150,000 Bitcoin, right? And we're talking about 2,500 Bitcoin, 3,000 Bitcoin. It's a big hill for us to climb, and we need to get those numbers up sooner rather than later, because it provides and we talked about this when you first came on about multisig. It provides almost it's like a warning shot to people who want to attack. So when you talk about multisig, it was this idea that if every attacker assumes that you have multisig, they're not going to come into your house and break your knees to try and get your Bitcoin, because they'll just assume that it's in multisig and it's going to be a long, arduous process, and they're going to have to go to multiple locations. I think when it comes to state actors, when it comes to authoritarian governments that are trying to attack private Bitcoin users, if they see that number go up, if they see this privacy liquidity pool increase, they might be motivated to not try and attack the privacy of Bitcoin users, because they know that there's a way out for them. So I want to get that number up as soon as possible, because I think it reduces the likelihood of large-scale state attack on the privacy side.
Yeah, I think that thinking makes a lot of sense, Matt, for sure.
Yeah. So right now, by the way, freaks, Keto is dealing with a fire at his fiat job. So right now it's just the Odell and Craig show. But he'll be back when he can be back. And Keto, if you're listening, just chime in when you're talkable again. So that was an interesting Whirlpool conversation. What are I have a bunch of things. Like, what are your thoughts on adding? So Samurai has two things, right? So Samurai has Whirlpool, which is this coordinated coin join, right? Oh, so that was the other thing that join market, before I get distracted even more. The trade-off that join market made was they didn't want that issue that I said with the Whirlpool coordinator, right? Like the Whirlpool coordinator could get shut down, which is not a privacy risk, but it's a denial of service attack, right? So as far as the join market devs are concerned, and I had the two lead ones on, I had Belcher and Waxwing on, that's not a trade-off they're willing to make, right? So they wanted join market to be as censorship resistant as possible. And that's why there's no centralized coordinator. Every round is coordinated by the maker themselves, the person providing the liquidity. No, it's actually coordinated by the taker. So the maker doesn't know how it's coordinated. So it's coordinated by each individual taker, and the taker will coordinate maybe like a a waterfall of 10 coin joins between 10 different makers. And that way, the individual makers, like as long as there's one or two individual makers in there that aren't malicious, then they can't track the transaction through the waterfall. And the taker's coordinating also. The taker knows that I'm coordinating it so that there's no malicious coordinator. I don't have to rely on a coordinator. But in the reality of the world right now is running a CoinJoin coordinator is completely allowed. So if we can get away with that, if we can get away with having a centralized coordinator to make it an easier UX and a better liquidity profile, then we should absolutely do that. And if we can't in the future, then sure, by all means, we'll go to a more censorship resistant model where you don't have a centralized coordinator. But in the meantime, if we can get away with it, I think that's absolutely a benefit. And this is like it's a similar trade-off, but even less so than you're talking about with like these larger Electrum servers, public Electrum servers that are run, because those public Electrum servers have a privacy risk attached to them. With this, it's all blinded. So there's no privacy risk. It's just completely a denial of service vector. So yeah, I mean, so Samurai has the coordinated coin joins, and then they also have collaborative transactions that are uncoordinated. So they have a fake coin join that they do, which is called Stonewall, which is what all their transactions default to on the wallet. And that's just me with my own UTXOs. When I do a transaction, it looks on chain, it looks like it's a coin join, a two-person coin join. Then they have Stonewall ×2, which is a actual two-person coin join without a coordinator involved. It's just between the two parties. And then they have the pay join, which they call Stowaway, which is it looks like an ordinary payment, but one of the inputs is provided by the receiver of the payment to further throw off chain analysis. So they have a mix of these collaborative transactions. Do you foresee adding any of these non-coordinated collaborative transactions in?
I kind of think you have to, because your post mix, you can't just treat it as you would any. It's you need to think a bit about that, and I think Samurai actually advise you kind of to keep your coins within your sort of wallet to take advantage of those different techniques that they have. So yeah, I definitely see it as part of the overall thing. You kind of have to build one feature at a time. But for sure, those kind of, and that's kind of what I wanted to get onto, is just being able to take advantage of steganographic techniques, which is the things that you've just described. I think that's really important. So Sparrow does currently support the pay-to-endpoint pay join. And I just think it's really cool. I just also think that it's got an incentive model which doesn't necessarily seem to work all that well. So I'm not super hopeful that BIP 78, I think is what it is going to get widespread support. I really hope I'm wrong, but I think we need to be building these additional methods in, because otherwise, all of that sort of mixing that you've done just becomes easily, you can kind of see what's going on unless you spend those post-mix outputs in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, so there's like an interesting piece of nuance here in terms of Sparrow, because I imagine the majority of Sparrow users are keeping their keys cold on hardware wallets, whether that's single sig or multi-sig. And the main trade-off with these coordinated coin join protocols, or just, yeah, I guess the main trade-off with the 24/7 coordinated coin join protocol like Whirlpool is that the keys need to be hot if you want to be participating, right? Obviously, if you're going to be a part of a multi-party transaction, those keys need to be available to sign the transaction. So they need to be hot. with the uncoordinated collaborative transactions, whether that's coin swaps, pay join, or these 2-person coin joins, or maybe even 3-person coin joins, they only need to be hot when you're actually coordinating that, when you're actually, doing that transaction, right? So presumably you can do that from a hardware wallet, from even a multi-sig setup relatively easily if the UX facilitates it properly. So like it's in a lot of ways, in terms of UX flow, it is probably an easier thing to implement. I mean, you just talked about PayJoin P2EP, right? I assume in Sparrow the way it's implemented is like basically, well, one side is just always on, right? It's like you're paying a BTC Pay server, so they're already hot. And then the side that has, a hardware wallet set up, whether that's multi-sig or single sig, is basically deciding at will, I'm going to do this transaction. So they're able to bring their keys hot just for that, or they're able to sign that transaction at the time of that transaction, right?
Yeah. So yeah, that is the way it works. One kind of idea that I thought would be really cool, and I this is kind of a long way off, but I mean, just imagine if we could use Coldcard's CK Bunker feature to keep the sort of the keys cold while we participated in a whirlpool. I mean, that would be I think quite a big win. But as I say, it's a long kind of way off to get to that point. But these are the kind of ideas that I think would make it much easier, because if you're looking at it today and you're kind of looking at your cold storage stash and you're trying to decide, should I bring that out of cold storage, mix it, and then send it back in, there's always the worry of bringing it into a hot wallet. Even if you do it a small part at a time, it's just a reason. It's kind of a friction point that might make people not do it. So if we can remove that friction to some extent, we can make it just easier to make that call.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I was discussing earlier about trade-offs. And I mean, have you talked to like the samurai ride or die? Like, privacy is all that matters. Privacy is your number one priority. They would advise you to keep all your funds hot in Whirlpool constantly until it's time to spend, because that'll give you the best privacy guarantees. And then if you're talking to someone about security guarantees, they'll say you should keep it in a multi-sig, multi-jurisdictional. Like, even if you want to spend it, it's going to take yourself a couple months and traveling around the world to spend your funds. And the realistic scenario for a lot of people, the practical scenario in the middle ground, is you keep a decent amount of funds in Whirlpool that are constantly mixing, and you try and reduce that risk by also having a cold storage stack. And when it comes time to spend, then you'll send from cold storage back into Whirlpool, let it sit there for a while before you actually come to spend. And then what you mentioned was like the CK Bunker idea, where that wouldn't actually be cold, but it'd be like cold-ish, where you have like a plurality of your keys or CK Bunker, which is this cold card, basically HSM mode, this hardware signing mode. And you have it with a set number of rules. So like the rules are set in a way that'll authorize a Whirlpool transaction, but it won't authorize draining the wallet, which is like a very interesting middle ground to me. I think it could be very useful to people, and it would probably unlock more liquidity. People would be more comfortable putting more funds in. Now, the reality of the situation, though, to go even farther back in this conversation, is that these are the same trade-offs made on Lightning. Like with Lightning, your wallet is completely hot, and a lot of times you're actually even broadcasting your IP address. And most people, I don't know of anyone really using a multi-sig setup with like signing policies for their Lightning wallet. So it's almost always single sig. And there's a decent amount of funds there. There's whole businesses built on basically having these massive Lightning hot wallets. So I feel like there's more nuance there and room for different trade-off balances than people give it credit for. I don't think having a subset of your funds hot, so you're using Whirlpool, is the biggest risk in the world. It is definitely an additional risk. But it's just something that users need to keep in mind, basically.
Yeah, agreed. I think all of that's very accurate in the way I would see it. So, have your cold storage stash, make sure it is cold. Don't load up your cold storage wallet when you don't need those funds. By all means, like, do your key checks, make sure you can spend from the wallet from time to time. That's important to do. But your cold storage wallet, the whole idea is that it should be sort of cold, and then you keep a certain amount of funds which you can then send through Whirlpool and spend from there, and they're two separate amounts. I think that's the best in class at this moment in time. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, these are my favorite topics, but damn, they're fucking deep. Yeah, I mean, PayJoin, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, man. People like to hand wave like PayJoin will be, this great stenographic tool for us, but I don't know if the incentives there are just.
Yeah, they just don't seem to. I don't know. What you have to have is a merchant who wants to take part, and they have no particular incentive to do that unless they just care about the privacy of the customers who are paying them, which is not a zero thing, but it's not a financial thing. And then you kind of have to, obviously, as the consumer paying the merchant, you have to spend a little bit more in fees because you're including an extra input.
Right.
So it's just neither of those two things are major, and I would definitely consider it a net positive to use it if I could. But whether everyone else will see it that way, it's harder to see that being the outcome, or at least becoming the default.
Especially since it's competing with Lightning transactions. And on Lightning, our big issue is receiver privacy. But if you're a diligent Bitcoin user and you want sender privacy on Bitcoin, with Lightning, you either spin up your own node really quick. OpenArms talks about this a lot. You spin up your own node, you fund it with a CoinJoin UTXO. And you make payments with that for a couple months, and then you shut it down, and that's going to give you a way less fee burden than if you use PayJoin, and that's going to constantly that incentive between Lightning and PayJoin will constantly be there. All of these assumptions rely on a high fee environment, though. So I'm literally watching. We're watching the mempool.space, and it's just completely empty right now. So who knows?
Yeah, that's true. What are your thoughts about CoinSwap, Matt? I mean, I kind of really like the idea. I think it looks super interesting. Again, I sort of wonder about the incentives behind it. But the thing that I've seen talked about is, what is the market like for people who want to exchange their coin history? Is that something that is attractive to people, because you don't know what coin history you're going to get, right?
Yeah. And then what are you going to do? You're going to chain analysis your fucking new coin that you got?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one question that I haven't fully figured out in my own mind yet. I'm just not sure about that one.
So I'm trying to check my biases here, so hopefully you can help me. But to me, when we talk about all these things, when we talk about Lightning, when we talk about PayJoin, when we talk about coin swaps, when we talk about atomic swaps, to me, these are all post-mix tools. So I think you do CoinJoins first. And CoinJoins, it's interesting, right? Because the main negative, the perceived main negative of CoinJoin, besides the cost, because it is definitely cost you more if you use CoinJoin. The main perceived negative is that it's really visible on chain. But when you talk about the negatives of something like CoinSwap, the main negative is actually probably the exact opposite. Where if I do like a CoinSwap with you, and let's just say like in the most, I don't know, like it's connected to a sanctioned address or something, right? Like let's say like it's connected to like a known ransomware gang. And then I spend that somewhere, and then on chain, it looks like that was just my UTXO the whole fucking time. So then I can get in trouble for that. But with CoinJoin, with these equal output CoinJoins on chain, it's very obvious you did a CoinJoin, and that's perceived as a negative. But to me, that's kind of it's kind of parallel to encryption. With when I send an encrypted message, an observer doesn't know what, if the encryption's sound, the observer doesn't know what's in the message, right? But they know that I sent an encrypted message. If you use a VPN, your ISP and your government know that you're encrypting your internet traffic. If they don't collude with the VPN provider who's actually encrypting your traffic, who's your counterparty there, they don't know what your actual traffic is, but they know it's encrypted. So to me, CoinJoins are actually this. It's brilliant that it's on chain and it's visible on chain that it's a privacy-seeking collaborative transaction where it breaks the history and the forward tracking and the history of it. So to me, CoinJoin should be the de facto standard in all of these wallets. And then all these other tools, whether that's opening up a Lightning channel, doing a pay join, doing a coin swap, are something that happens after this equal output coin join.
Okay, sure, Matt. But why would you coin swap after you've coin joined? What would be the incentive behind that? Because I know Chris Belcher, the author of coin swap, says that coin swap is a replacement for coin join.
Right.
So, what would be, would it be sort of some way after the coin join has taken place that you would find the need to coin swap? Or
well, so like the Belcher's dream, I fucking love Chris, big supporter of his work. I financially contribute to his work. I advocate for his work. I loved having him on the show. Love having conversations with him. The dream for Chris with coin swaps is that if we have like 40% of Bitcoiners using coin swaps without CoinJoin, just coin swaps, the chain analysis companies and the governments that they serve, and the corporate surveillance companies that they serve will just hand in the towel, and they'll be like, there's no way for us to reasonably assume that this transaction is owned by this person because so many people are using coin swaps. Now, the problem there is that pain point from 0 to 40% or whatever the threshold you want to say is the threshold where we have enough Bitcoin transactions that are using coin swaps that it completely throws all your assumptions out the window. That bootstrap period is super dangerous to users in my mind, because like we said earlier, is you're going to get other people's coins and you're not going to really know what the history is of those coins. And we're going to have naive chain analysis companies and the governments they serve just assuming that it's yours. And even if you end up defending yourself in court or something, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be a huge fucking headache. And maybe you'll have accounts closed and all this other shit that you have to fucking deal with. So that middle ground to me is almost untenable. Like we have a hard enough time trying to get CoinJoin usage up. If you have that additional concern that you don't really know, who you're swapping with, and that you might face punishment based on what you get, it's obviously going to hinder adoption. Now, why would someone use it as a post-mix tool? The reason someone would use it as a post-mix tool is because it literally breaks the link on chain, right? So on CoinJoin, when they use these equal output CoinJoins, you're muddying the probability waters, right? Like tracking Bitcoin's a probability game. So every time someone tracks Bitcoin, they're making assumptions and they're assigning probability. With these new chain analysis surveillance softwares or whatever, they do it behind the scenes and they have a pretty UX, right? But basically, what's happening is they're assigning probabilities to every transaction to whether or not ownership has changed, right? And in particular instances, it's very fucking obvious, right? Like if you make a transaction and one output has one output is to a wrapped SegWit address, a 3 address, and the other output is back to a native SegWit, a BC1 address, and you sent from a BC1 address, the BC1 output is obviously your change. You paid a wrapped SegWit address, and your change is the native SegWit. So that's obvious. If you pay, people like paying in round numbers. So Craig, if I donate to you and I donate 1 million sats, and then the change is like 432,000 sats and 956 or something, like that is obviously my change, and my donation was the round number. So there's certain heuristics that are like pretty obvious probability wise, and then there's ones that are that they're making bigger guesses. And with CoinJoin, their probability gets completely thrown out the window. If you use a Whirlpool CoinJoin, you have 5 UTXOs go in, and there's no deterministic links. There's like 10,000 different combinations that could be that transaction of the way it happened. And you could be any of those 5 leaving the pool. And then all of a sudden, if 2 of those people go into another round, then it makes it even more cloudy of a situation. With coin swaps, you literally just break the chain. You're not fucking with the probabilities. You're taking someone else's UTXO that is completely not connected to you on chain. So it's more similar to like one of these custodial mixers where like you send them Bitcoin, they send you someone else's Bitcoin. So if you need the best privacy, your best solution would probably be equal output coin join and then go into coin swaps. Now, why would the average user use coin swaps? Maybe they wouldn't, and that's fine. But if there's a subset of users, then all of a sudden this whole coin swaps idea of steganographic privacy, this idea that it looks like a normal transaction, but it's really a coin swap. If there's some people leaving the pool and going into coin swaps, then you have to basically operate under the assumption that anyone leaving the pool could be a coin swap. So it improves the privacy of all participants of the equal output coin joins if you're in the same liquidity pool, if a subset of those users are using coin swaps, I think.
Yeah, that makes some sense. And we could actually see how, the way that the coin swappers coordinators is with these message boards, or at least that's what's been put forward now. So you could maybe even see how, somebody could say, listen, I only want to coin swap with the output from a coin join. I don't want to coin swap with anything else.
Well, you don't even need, so Chris is operating under his join market model where he doesn't want any centralized server. Right? Because that's obviously less censorship resistant. That server could get shut down. But you could have a blinded centralized coin swap server that only allows post Whirlpool UTXOs to be in the coin swap.
Exactly.
And then you don't even have to coordinate amounts because all the amounts are already equal.
Yeah. And then you basically don't have to worry about the coin history thing nearly as much. I think that world could just make it a bit easier for the coin swap to be a more attractive option.
Keto, you're back?
Yeah, I'm back. Isn't that pretty close actually to what Stonewall 2x is doing?
So Stonewall 2x is a coin join. It's a 2-person coin join.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's a similar concept, right? Where if the majority of people are using just regular Stonewall, which is a 1-person coin join that looks like a 2-person coin join, and then some people are using the 2-person coin join, then you kind of have to operate under the assumption that every time you see one of those, it could be a 2-person coin join, even though the majority of them are probably 1-person coin joins. but yes, it's a similar concept, and that's why I think it's just good to have all these different post-mix tools. But I mean, I also think I'm part of the minority that thinks Lightning's a post-mix tool, unless you get onboarded directly to Lightning, which might be a thing in a high sustained fee market. I don't know. Once again, I don't know when that's going to happen because I was completely caught off guard by the current one we're in. But if you're coming from on chain, it should be CoinJoin into Lightning every time. Period.
Back to that coin swap and inheriting someone else's coin history. I think I personally prefer to go straight from mixing to spending. Because at least I know that these coins, the only visible history of my coins is the mixing. So yeah, unless the coin swap happens with someone with also some coins straight from the mixer, I would probably not use that.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm envisioning here, and it's what the Samurai guys have talked about, is that all participants would be post-mix.
Yeah.
So it just furthers the privacy guarantees that you would get rather than if you were just plain if you were just purely using CoinJoin, right?
Is that really different from just one more round?
I mean, it's all numbers, right? I don't know.
Good question.
Yeah. That is a question. Maybe not. Maybe not if they're the same liquidity pool and you're swapping with your own liquidity pool. And except that I think it makes the liquidity pool denser, right? Like you're just adding another link between two rounds within that wider liquidity pool that didn't exist previously. And maybe you have time as a constraint, right? We both know that remixing and the way Whirlpool is implemented takes a while. But if you have a time constraint, and let's say you're a mobile user and you just do one Whirlpool round and then you go into a coin swap, you're getting probably significantly more privacy than you would otherwise, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I don't know. We're on the bleeding edge of all this shit. No one really wants to talk about it. And so I think it's the same situation for atomic swaps, right? So coin swaps are atomic swaps that happen on Bitcoin only. And then atomic swaps is more generally alluded to as going into an alt chain and then switching back.
Yeah.
The most common one being cited is Monero because it has confidential transactions already built in, and ring signatures. So basically every Monero transaction is a coin join. And it's the same thing because you hear the Monero stands, they'll say that they don't want to swap with a Bitcoin user because they don't want that Bitcoin history.
Interesting.
So making it a post-mix tool solves that. And this is one of the interesting back and forths I have with the Monero group is that, they say that CoinJoin is not something that should be worked on. Like you should just switch to Monero. But at the same time, in the same breath, they'll say they won't trade their Monero for Bitcoin because the majority of Bitcoin that's being traded for Monero has bad history attached to it. Okay, so anything that you swap with Monero should automatically be CoinJoin. It should all be post-mix.
Yeah.
I literally think that we should make as many transactions as possible CoinJoin. Literally everything we talk about should be a post-mix tool, basically, after CoinJoin. Like the default on-chain should be CoinJoin, even if it's a fake CoinJoin, like a Stonewall, and it just looks like a CoinJoin. It should at least be a decoy CoinJoin. Now, the major issue there is block space and fees, right? Because if you're faking a CoinJoin every transaction, you're going to pay significantly more in fees. But I think privacy is worth it. I don't know. It's definitely not an easy solution. I think there's no easy solution.
No, there isn't, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, people can use wallets that don't do that. I just think that we should be pushing at least the free open source wallets that the community really, the hardcore community likes, should all have, you know, some kind of collaborative transaction tools built in automatically.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the sort of challenge here is to build them in an easy to use way. You know, that's not to say that the tools built today are super hard to use, but I like to believe that things can always be easier and make more sense, and the sort of UI can help with that. So, yeah, I think that's definitely something that we can work on. You know, now that we've got the kind of basic, we're sort of starting to figure out what works and what doesn't, not only from an implementation, but also from an incentive point of view. I think we can start to tweak the sort of UI, which always comes later on. You know, you have to just get the thing to work first, and then you can kind of iterate over the UI and kind of make it easy for people to use. Because, you know, I mean, I've sort of been through Whirlpool, and it's great, but it certainly wasn't obvious to me at all times exactly what was going on. I kind of had to read and go back to the docs and stuff. So I'm sure that I'm not alone in that. And you know, that's what good UX does, is it kind of just makes it easier. You feel secure and in control as you're doing it.
To be clear here, I don't pretend to know all the answers, right? I think the status quo right now is so poor for privacy that these discussions need to be had. These discussions need to be had, and we need to push the ecosystem forward, because if we stay at the status quo, the end result is 99% of Bitcoin users' full financial transaction history is being tracked constantly, relatively easily. And the discussion just isn't happening, really. And one of the reasons I started Dispatch in the first place was because I think these topics need, you know, open discussion on a constant basis.
Yeah, and you know, that's right. But I think, as I'm saying, it's sort of, you know, if you look at how far we've come with multisig, you know, I mean, just a few years ago, it was really hard. I mean, like almost to the point where you would have to write your own code in order to get a multisig wallet up. Like there was almost no other way to do it. And you know, if you wanted to use hardware wallets as well, you know, you were basically, you know, it was just going to be super hard. So now it's just a few years down the line, and it's become much easier. So it's really about trying to get the incentive right, and then get the sort of UX right, in order to make these things become part of people's lives. So it's just become something that you do because you realize that it's the best idea, and if you don't do it, you're likely to worry about it, or it's going to become the sort of mental load that I was talking about earlier. You know, you're kind of thinking, oh, well, I haven't done that right, so now people are going to know about my transactions. They're going to know how much I'm being paid. They're going to know where I spend. You know, all of these things that we think about that other people are not thinking about, that I think needs to become, you know, clearer. And I just have a belief that good software can help make it obvious. You know, if you can, for example, you know, show somebody in a UI how the different UTXOs or different sort of TXOs as they are spent are connected to each other, you can kind of say, well, did you know that Joe Bloggs, who you paid the other day, knows how much you earn because your salary went straight out to him, and the change then came back. And it was a round amount, as you were saying, Matt. So those kind of things people don't think about, but it's mainly just because they're hidden. And as Bitcoin itself and, you know, the way that it works becomes more well understood, so, you know, the software can evolve and just show you what's going on. And that's kind of the ethos behind showing as much detail as I do in the wallet that I build, is just, you know, I think it's important, because if you don't know the stuff, then ultimately it's going to hurt you. You need to understand how the protocol works to some degree, Otherwise, you're always going to be, there's always going to be people who understand and kind of use that knowledge against you, at least can.
Yeah, sovereignty and personal responsibility is always going to be more difficult, no matter what, because it requires some responsibility of the user. So I don't expect that we will have 100% penetration with these types of things. But I want it to get to a point where someone who realizes the need is able to access them and use them effectively without too much effort. I think a perfect example right now is this, this El Salvador legal tender law. Is like, if we have people right now, buying sandwiches and stuff, we don't want the person they pay for the sandwich to know how much money they have or how much money they're making. And we don't want their government to know either. And we don't want the million different corporations that all want to leverage that information for ads and monetization to have that information either. And this is not an abstract goal. This is a very realistic, pragmatic thing, that if we have people spending Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis using Bitcoin, the default should be relatively reasonable in terms of privacy, and they shouldn't have to go above and beyond to try and protect themselves. We're talking about incentives a lot here, and I mean, one of the things that we're really up against is this insidious KYC that's just spreading, and regulatory compliance, in air quotes, that's spreading through the industry. And no one really wants to talk up against it because it's how they pay their rent. These companies, these regulated companies, have the most money. They're the most profitable businesses. And a lot of influential Bitcoin people, make a lot of money off the backs of those companies and their regulatory compliance. And the fact that we have these large KYC databases being built up on whose transaction is which, pushes back against basically everything we're fighting for. And it's a very dark incentive that people don't really discuss. I had Belcher and Waxwing on the show. And I said to them, it's when we're designing these incentives, when you're designing these incentives about people using transactions more privately, we're up against the BlockFis of the world. Michael Saylor posted a tweet that had like 2,000 retweets or something like that. And it was the Ideal mobile wallet is a KYC'd wallet that automatically gives you a loan in US dollars based on your Bitcoin as collateral. And then you spend that instead of spending Bitcoin directly, right? And when these incentive models are being designed, a user is going to consider that as an option over whatever the private alternative is, right? Like, they're going to consider that interest payment that they could get if they loaned out their Bitcoin with some centralized, regulatory compliant, non-privacy focused service versus using private transactions, right?
Yeah. I mean, as I say, that is my biggest concern, because if that happens too much, then it won't follow too far behind that they'll decide to, in air quotes, print their own Bitcoin in the background, and just because, unless we sort of can withdraw it and they can be left high and dry by basically saying that they have, more than they actually do, then we really don't have too many weapons against that. So for me, that is a huge risk, and something that I don't think is talked about enough.
Keto, what's up over there? I haven't heard from you in a minute.
Not much. Listening to you guys. I guess I lost my stream of thoughts.
So I'm curious, before we wrap this up, I'm curious on your guys' opinions on the fact that mempools are just completely empty right now. Is it like, am I right to be I could give, maybe I will admit that I was, a little bit too excited about the price increase. I always am. Between me and the freaks, like the reason I say stay humble all the time is because I'm never humble in bull markets. So I'm just constantly trying to remind myself, and I might as well remind the freaks at the same time. So maybe I definitely got a little bit too far ahead of myself, especially when I was in all caps saying 200K by conference day. That kind of half started as a joke because you just get so much engagement whenever you say it. But I kept saying it. So anyway, I deserve to fucking eat crow on that. But mempools being completely empty has completely thrown me for a loop. Like this is not like I was way fucking wrong about this. I could give two shits about the price. I'm a long-term investor in Bitcoin. I practice what I preach. I don't sell Bitcoin. I fucking stay humble, stack sats in that regard. I just constantly am just accumulating as much Bitcoin as I can fucking get. So when the price goes down, to me, it's truly stacker's paradise. It's just more time to accumulate. I'm just fiat mining. I'm making my fiat salary and I'm just putting into Bitcoin. The mempool being completely clear right now, amid a 50% hash rate reduction, is just seems fucking like a bad sign. Am I wrong?
So my point of view, Matt, is that the mempool is completely driven by price. Up and down. I think if as you were saying, the number of people in coin joins and the like is not really material to drive mempool usage. In fact, most of the stuff that we talk about is not really material to drive. If we look at the number of blockchain.com wallets, we shouldn't be too surprised that when the price is not going up or down, when it's kind of just hanging around the same, then the mempool just stays empty because people are, they've kind of, those who are going to sell have obviously sold. Those who were waiting on the sidelines to buy have obviously still on the sidelines. And the majority of Bitcoin's usage is driven by people trying to, basically make or not lose whatever they have put sort of into it. So, it won't stay this way forever, and the mempool usage will go up again, and maybe it'll clear again, and perhaps it won't. At some point it won't, right? At some point, the number of users who just kind of use it. Yeah, because at some point the number of users who will just be using it like you and I do will get to a point where the block size is just too small, right? That day will come. It's obviously not here today. We obviously don't have the usage in the world today for that to be true. For now, it's still a price-driven thing, and we shouldn't be too surprised about the 50% drop in hash rate, because if the mempool's pretty much empty, it's even if the hash rate drops, it's not going to suddenly change that all that much. I mean, we lose a few minutes perhaps, but it's not really a major effect. So,
well, my point is in difficulty adjustment periods where where it's trending down, like right now, where we're projecting a negative difficulty adjustment after the previous one, which was also significantly the biggest negative we've ever had. Usually fee pressure is higher in those situations, right? Because blocks are coming in slower.
Yeah. And I think if the mempool was full when this happened, if we were sitting with a serious backlog when this happened, I think we would absolutely be feeling the pressure today. I think we'd be paying high fees. But just the fact that it is empty, and the price hasn't moved much, I think there's no particular reason why it would suddenly fill that I can think of.
So, Keto Miner, what are your thoughts here? Thank you, Craig. Those are very insightful.
I think the mempool pressure is a conspiracy against me. It's always full when I need it to be empty, when I need it to be full. So.
The 4 months ago, I had fucking fee FOMO. I was like, I'm never going to be able to pay 23 sats per byte again.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's pretty weird that it's so empty now, and maybe it's a vacation effect. I don't know.
So you want to hear the Bear Odell is coming out 2 hours and 30 minutes into the show because only the ride or dies made it this far. To me, it's a sign. Well, first of all, clearly, not enough of the freaks are using CoinJoin. Like CoinJoin should be a, buyer of last resort of block space. It should just be a constant fee pressure thing. We should have so many people using CoinJoin that there's just always a reserve demand for block space. So that's unfortunate to see. And then the second thing is I think it's, there's still a shit ton of traders, Craig, that are trading these price movements even when we're in sideways zone. So I don't think the traders have left us. To me, it's a more of a sign that people are using these custodial. They're using these custodial regulated services rather than actually holding their own keys and using Bitcoin. I mean, even if you are the least consumer of block space as a sovereign Bitcoin user, you're still should be making, a withdrawal a week from whatever your regulated custodian is. I'm not even saying you put it into CoinJoin, which you should, but if you're just making a transaction to your cold storage and you're stacking to cold storage, you should at least be making one transaction a week. Or one transaction every 2 weeks. How many people are doing that right now? Like, are there more than 5,000 of us?
Okay, but Matt, if people are using custodial wallets when they buy and sell, then why did the mempool go up so much when the price was going up? Because, in theory, they wouldn't be making on-chain, transactions at that time if it was all just being done with sort of money behind the scenes.
So, I mean, there's two theories that I'm working with. The first is, leveraged Bitcoin trading on bucket shops, where you have, and we even saw, before BitMEX cleaned up shop and started adding KYC and truly blocking Americans. Like, we saw hedge funds that were acquiring Bitcoin, whether through OTC or some other method. And then they were sending it to BitMEX or whatever bucket shop they wanted to use to do leverage Bitcoin trading. And they didn't really trust that much funds on there. So they were constantly moving back and forth. And then the other thing is shitcoin trading. Like, the shitcoin market has just completely gotten destroyed. Because I guess my thought is unfortunately, if you're a regulated, semi-wealthy person in America or one of these developed countries, your main incentive to leave your regulated custodial exchange is to go send it to a shitcoin bucket shop and try and buy some shitcoins.
Well, do we actually see the same decrease in transactions on other chains?
I don't know. I don't follow any of that shit. I assume there's only like one other chain, which is Ethereum, that has any kind of transaction pressure. But there's just always have like shenanigans happening over there. So who even knows? Like, right now, fees are up because there's some Uniswap clone that's spamming the chain, supposedly.
Yeah, that your theory might be right, Matt. The beauty of Bitcoin is that we just don't know. It's
my worry, Craig, is that mempool's being this, like, it's not even just like kind of empty. Like, it's literally 1 sat per byte just gets you into the next block. It's not even like kind of empty. it's fucking barren. And my concern is that it shows that we're way earlier than we thought we were. Even I thought we were, and I think I thought we were earlier than most people think, which is fine in the grand scheme of things, except that it means we're more vulnerable. There's less sovereign Bitcoin holders than people think there are.
I agree 100% with that. 100%. That is, as I said, that is my biggest concern. I think if we actually knew how many non-custodial Bitcoin holders there were, we would be shocked at that figure as being as low as it was. We have a long way to go.
And the mempools being this fucking empty is to me is like tangible proof of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I'm quite sure that if you got every wallet dev in a room and asked them if they had, hundreds of thousands of users, they just say no. It really isn't the sort of case. I mean, the fact that we still can't outdo shitty blockchain.com, I mean, really, it just shows we have a long way to go. And that's kind of okay. I'm not too concerned. If you look at the growth of the internet, it did take decades. It feels like it happened very, very fast, but I mean, it did take quite a bit of time. It gets to a certain point where it becomes a need to know rather than a sort of a nice to know skill set. We're not there today. We're definitely not. So when that happens, I can't say, but hopefully, in the next 2 to 3 years. And then I think we'll see a bit of a step change, as we kind of saw around the year, 2001 to 2005 or 6. We really saw a big change in the number of people who understood how to email, how to browse the web, how to kind of, just get their shit done online. And Bitcoin is definitely pre that. It's not in that space yet. So, we need to go through, the sort of bull cycle that we're in now, and maybe one more in order to get to that sort of point. So yeah, we're early.
Tito, am I being too bearish?
Just enough. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I think we are like late 70s, early 80s in computing now. Still the period where people are building Apple One cases out of wood in their garage.
And Tito would know.
And yeah, we are definitely overestimating some numbers, like even things like how many Tor nodes are around on the internet. Actually, I learned the real number quite recently, and it's scaringly
What's
small.
the real number?
Less than 10,000.
Yeah, I would say less than. So less than 10,000 sovereign Bitcoin node users, right?
Well, no, it doesn't include the user Tor nodes. It just counts the relays and exit nodes. But still, it's crazy. It's crazy small actually, and maybe the numbers we see for Bitcoin nodes and for Lightning nodes are actually accurate, and there isn't that many hiding.
So first of all, we have Winsome Hacks in good username in on Twitch coming into the live chat saying that I've flipped bearish. I've not flipped bearish. I am more bullish than 99% of people on this fucking planet. Okay, but it's important to be realistic in terms of sovereign Bitcoin users, and that's different than price, by the way. I think it's detached from price to a degree, because we do have a lot of people who buy Bitcoin, and they do increase the price as long as there's not rehypothecation, which we're early still on. I don't think there is really. So when Michael Saylor, for instance, goes, and I know he's a very controversial figure, goes and buys a bunch of Bitcoin and then sends it from his custodial broker to his custodial wallet, that does increase buy pressure. So I think most people are underestimating price still. And I stand by the fact that I think people will be extremely surprised at the upside in terms of price. I think people are greatly overestimating the number of sovereign Bitcoin users. So let's just go through some estimates. I'm just curious before we wrap this up. So how many people got? Look, once again, there's no way for us to easily calculate these numbers, which is why proof of work is so important. Like the reason we have distributed proof of work is because you have this verifiable real work that anyone can verify and know it exists. But when it comes to user numbers and everything and node numbers, there's no way to prove one node, one user. And there's no way to definitively prove how many individual users are out there. Maybe it's a little bit easier because people have such horrible privacy right now, but you're still making a guess. You're making an educated guess. And ideally, where I want us to be in 5 years is I don't want Glassnode to have a business model. Like I want them to look at the chain and just have no fucking idea what the fuck is going on. But where we stand right now, how many individuals around the world do we think are holding their own keys? We'll start with Craig.
I was hoping you were not going to start with me. Sure. Probably less than 100,000, Matt. Yeah.
Okay, I'll co-sign that. What do you think, Keto? Do you think are you under on less than 100,000?
My number was about 100,000.
Okay, so all these numbers, when people say like there's like 30 million Bitcoin users or whatever, they're just completely off base.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're including like Robinhood users or whatever, like full custodial people, right?
But I mean, Matt, who owned a personal computer in the mid 80s? I mean,
okay, that's fine.
You know.
I'm not saying that this means Bitcoin's dead. I just want some, realism here in the discussion, right?
No, okay. Sure. I agree. But, I think an important, kind of point on the plus side is that, if you were around at that time and you were sort of part of that kind of journey of being into, whether you owned a Commodore 64 or a Sinclair or, that kind of world was the most creative time in computing that I've ever known. It was really amazing, and it's just fucking cool to be part of this at that time. I have no doubt that Bitcoin is going to go the same route of just becoming a default and de facto part of our lives, but being able to build on it and make changes to it as we are doing, because believe me, in 10 to 20 years time, you're going to be tinkering on the very edges. You're not going to be working on the kind of core stuff as we are today. That's a great time to just be in it. And,
no, look, 100% correct. Look,
yeah.
Look, all of us here, whether it's the three of us, me, you, and Keto, or whether it's the Ride or Die freaks that are in the live chat, or whether it's the Ride or Die freaks that are listening to this as soon as it gets uploaded and they're streaming sats, like we're all in. We're all in, and there's no place I'd rather be. I have no regrets whatsoever. As far as I'm concerned, I'm one of the luckiest men in the world. I'm super grateful to be here. It's fucking awesome. That being said, I share this podium with less than 100K people that are holding their own keys. So we have that for keys. How many users are using their own node? Individuals.
I go first.
Yeah, you go first this time.
I would say between 2 and 5K.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree as well. I like that we have consensus here. Yeah. I was going to say 5K. I was going to say less than 5K. Okay. So we have that for using nodes, using their own node. So we have 100,000 people holding their own keys. Then we have about 5,000 people, less than 5,000 people using their own node. How many are holding their own keys, using their own node, and using Lightning?
Probably about the same.
Yeah, well, perhaps half of that, I would guess.
Yeah, I think there's a decent amount of people that are using their own node. I mean, look, even we had that like OG who fucking lost 1,000 Bitcoin in the Electrum phishing scam, and he wasn't using his own node. The guy had 1,000 Bitcoin and it was in a hot wallet on Electrum.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, I would say less than 5,000. I would say significantly less than 5,000. I would say like 2,500, 3,000 people are using their own node and Lightning. Now, Lightning does have the benefit that there's probably a substantial amount of retail using Lightning without their own node, whether they're using like a Moon wallet and with 2 U's, or if they're using a completely custodial option like a Blue Wallet or a Wallet of Satoshi. There's probably, or like Strike. There's probably a significant amount that are using Lightning without their own node. But even that is probably less than 15K or 20K, right? I'm going to take your silence as agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 100,000, less than 100,000 are holding their own keys. We have less than 5,000 are using their own node. We have less than 3,000 using their own node and Lightning. How many do we think are using CoinJoin?
42.
42? Less than 2,000, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So the listenership of this show is a little bit over 20,000. So Dispatch is 6 months old, but we've basically inherited the majority of Tales from the Crypt listeners. But let's say Rabbit Hole Recaps have been going on for 3 years. We got over 20,000 listeners per episode. And I have not shut up about CoinJoin. And we have 10% of them are using CoinJoin. Or less than 10% of them are using CoinJoin.
It's still pretty hard, Matt. I mean, it's not the easiest thing, right? You have to have...
You don't have to run your own node to use CoinJoin.
Right. But I think the majority of people that are using CoinJoin, except for maybe Wasabi, the overwhelming majority of Wasabi users are light users or SPV users.
Yeah, that and Samurai users as well. I think there are way more Samurai users using their servers than running their own node.
That's interesting. I guess from pure user numbers, yes. Rather than volume of Bitcoin. I would say volume of Bitcoin, the majority are probably using their own node. Because if you're going to have any kind of substantial amount of Bitcoin in there, my guess is the majority of CoinJoin volume across the base, across all implementations, is like 1,000 hardos that have the majority of the volume, like when you measured in Bitcoin terms. Would you agree on that?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is not to like completely deflate the room. My point was, that we have a long road ahead of us, and anyone who thinks like the fight is over is completely off base. Like this is the start of a long war.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could see it as a war. I just see it as a curve, right? Every single time there's a price increase, the number of users go up. Some of those users, obviously quite a small number, on a percentage basis, just inflates every one of those figures, right? And so it will go on. But what I'm sort of hoping is that, as I say, once people realize that actually your privacy is in some ways worse when you receive your salary in Bitcoin and then you go and spend that UTXO, they'll start to kind of realize that these tools are much more important than what they had thought, or they probably wouldn't have even thought of them. So, I think it's also a question of just getting that education out there, which you're doing, Matt. It just takes time. The world does not change fast.
So we're 2 hours and 50 minutes in. This is where the real Baradell comes out. Once again, not by price. This is just on individual freedoms. And I think the Bitcoin network can survive even if individuals are completely fucked. The majority of individuals are completely fucked. But what I expect to happen is so the best thing we have going for us, I agree, Craig, is that as adoption increases and the circular economy increases, people are going to spend Bitcoin more often because they're going to be earning Bitcoin. And if we're right and their fiat is completely worthless, especially in weaker economies, but I think even in America and the EU, we're going to see those currencies become worse and worse store of values as the years go by. It seems to be amplifying really quickly. People are going to be paid in Bitcoin, and they're going to want to hold Bitcoin. This is part of our thesis. Most of our thesis, I think, is that we expect Bitcoin to be the money that people want to hold and people want to spend, or the money that people want to hold, and because they're holding it and the majority of their wealth is in it and they're earning it, they want to spend it, right? And when they come time to spend it and they realize that they're losing all this privacy, that they go and buy a sandwich or a car or some shit, and the person they pay knows how much they make, or their boss knows what they bought this weekend, they're going to go and try and seek out better privacy, right? Like that's the best argument, I think. The number one incentive we have going for us is that as users get burned, they will seek out better alternatives to improve their situation. Now, my concern, at least in the short to medium term, is what's going to happen is users are going to realize that because they're not idiots, and they're going to go to like custodial privacy solutions. So the perfect example I have of that is I've had people pay me. Some people are, relatively well known in the Bitcoin space, and they know where my tilt is in terms of Bitcoin, and they know I'm going to look at their transaction when they send it to me. And so what they do is they send from Strike or from Cash App because I can't tell anything about their transaction from it. I know they sent it from Cash App. It's very obvious. There's 98 inputs going to like all different types of addresses. Obviously, they didn't construct a transaction with 98 fucking inputs going to different directions. Or like it's like 6 inputs with like 98 outputs is what I meant to say. But it gives them privacy from everyone except Cash App or whoever Cash App is giving that information to, or if it leaks or whatnot, right? So I think we're going to be competing with like these. There's going to be a lot of people that say like that's good enough privacy. Is like you just get the privacy from like a regulated company that gives you the custodial privacy.
Yeah, a few years ago, I really thought that the privacy battle was just lost, just completely lost. But you are seeing people care about it more these days. I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like to think that trend becomes more, that people start to care more. Maybe that is overly optimistic. I'm willing to accept that it might be, but it's very hard to take what we currently perceive to be how much people care, and then put that forward into the future, and then say, well, how much they care today will continue to be how much they care. We just don't know. They might actually care less, but it probably won't stay the same.
Right.
So
yeah.
So I think that there is some hope that the trend at least has been away from just give all of my private information to large company X and it'll be fine. I think that there's been a trend away from that. It's for sure not changed the world yet, but it does give me some hope that in future people may care more.
I guess Snowden helped a lot with that.
No one remembers it. There's only like 10 of us. But we want to do the numbers again. There's like 2,000 people that remember. I think the bullish case is that I think people will go to the custodial privacy options and then they're going to get censored because that's what always happens, right? You're just going to have like the PayPal effect or whatever. Like people are going to have their accounts closed. They're going to have their money taken. They're going to have transactions blocked. They're going to have information leaked about them. There's going to be massive hacks, more and more hacks where user information is taken and leaked. And people will learn that they have to take their sovereignty back. But I think there's going to be a middle ground period where users acknowledge that they have privacy concerns, but instead of seeking the sovereign option, which is always going to be more difficult, they're going to go for that centralized custodial option, and we're just going to have to get through that like turbulent period.
Yeah, I think that's right, Matt, because, just to take an example from where I live currently, South Africa has this stupid law, which is decades old, which basically says you cannot export any of our local currency overseas. They see that as sort of, it's I guess, not dissimilar to the way China kind of views things. So what the Reserve Bank here is trying to do is to say, well, you can't, if you buy Bitcoin on a local exchange here, you can't send it to an international exchange and sell it there, because that obviously goes against this law. Now, obviously, we know that you can withdraw it to your wallet here, you can send it through CoinJoin, and there's not really much that anyone can tell after that point. So there's a real incentive there to take your money into your own hands versus keeping it in some kind of an online place where all of these rules are sort of, there. And I think that those rules are going to get worse, as the value of fiat drops over time. So governments will try adding whatever regulations they can to try and protect it, and trying to protect the flight of capital as they perceive it dropping against some other place is one of the key things that they'll do. And the obvious out is to take custody of your own funds. So hopefully they do that, because I think that that's going to be a way that people start to realize the value of taking it into your own hands.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think it's going to be longer than most people realize. But I think that both you and Keto agree with me on that. I'm just reiterating it.
Yeah.
Guys, this has been a fantastic conversation. I know I said we were going to keep it under 2 hours privately, but here we are. I appreciate you guys' time. I appreciate all the work you've put into your respective projects and what you've helped. You've helped so many sovereign Bitcoiners. I'm super grateful for both of you guys.
All of our 10 users.
Yeah, all of our all of your 500 users. I think this is a really insightful conversation. I think the freaks really appreciate it. I hope they did. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap this baby up?
No, Matt, it's been great chat. I hope you kind of figured out halfway along that part of this was me asking you things and getting the information out of your brain, which has been great. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. As usual, it was very interesting, and thanks, Craig. It was very nice talking with you.
Yeah, you too.
I appreciate you both. I appreciate all the ride or dies who joined us instead of Euro 2020 today in the live chat. I appreciate all the freaks who continue to support the show through the Podcasting 2.0 apps. A reminder, that is newpodcastapps.com. My favorite is Breeze. You just open it up, you search Citadel Dispatch, and you can stream sats directly to the show. You can also donate via citadeldispatch.com. We also have 2 new items on the merch store, citadeldispatch.com/stack, brought to you by Ride or Die Freaks that are setting those up for us. We have BTC Pins is providing a Citadel Dispatch magnet. 30% of that goes to me, 30% goes to him, and 30% goes to OpenSats for supporting Bitcoin development. And then we have Ride or Die Freak Quinn Solo, who is doing Citadel Dispatch flasks. Same deal. A third goes to me, a third goes to him, and a third goes to open source development via OpenSats. We still have the hats available. A lot of you freaks have reached out for the hats. I appreciate all the support there. Once again, the reminder is at citadeldispatch.com/stack. I'm really excited. I don't have next week's guests lined up yet, but the week after that, July 20th, is going to be Diverter and Econo Alchemist are going to both be rejoining the show for a special home mining episode. I think all the freaks should be trying to seek out ASICs right now. I think they're very cheap, and it's a really good way to stack KYC free while supporting the network. So stay tuned for that. And I appreciate you all. I thank you so much, Keto, and thank you so much, Craig. I look forward to having you guys on the show again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Love your freaks. Use your own node. Use CoinJoin. Open some Lightning channels. Stay humble, stack sats. I'll see you on Thursday for Rabbit Hole Recap. Cheers.